Perfect.
That way we're ready at 9 o'clock.
Okay, we're live on Facebook.
I have 2 times here, and one of them does say 9:02, so I got a little antsy.
Oh, well, that one's wrong.
Okay, and we're now live on YouTube, so whenever you're ready to begin.
All right, it is 9 a.m. Let's go ahead and begin. This is the Lake County Board of Supervisors. Today is March 9th, and this is our regular meeting. Let's go ahead and start with our moment of silence. This month is Women's History Month, and so let's go ahead and reflect on all the strong women that have impacted and affected our lives, and just take a moment of silence and appreciation. Supervisor Scott, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Go ahead and move on to item number 4, consideration of extra items not appearing on the posted agenda. Is there any extra items from the board or from staff? See me. Okay, hearing none, we will move on to item number 5, approval of the consent agenda. Is there any items that any board members or staff wish to pull? So I'm going to request that we pull item 5.2 for further discussion. And if there's nothing else from staff or the board, Jake, let's go ahead and open up the Zoom room and see if anybody from the public wishes to pull an item for further discussion from our consent agenda.
All right, I've sent a mute request out to the Zoom room floor. If you'd like to make a comment, please unmute and state your first and last name.
Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and bring it back to the board and let's take action on the items not being pulled.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda 5.1 and 5.3 through 5.18.
Second.
I have a motion and a second from Supervisor Crandall. Johanna, if we could please have our roll call.
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall,
Yes.
Supervisor Scott,
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska,
Yes.
and Supervisor Sabatier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since it's 9:03, Ms. Hutchinson, since this is your item that was pulled, would you mind if we took this item up right now?
Yes, I'm happy to. I also want to be mindful of Dr. Pace's time today, though, since he's due up in 3 minutes.
Yeah. I know that I will not be lengthy, and so that's why I figured it could be done,
okay,
depending on others.
Let's do it then. So, Mr. Chair, you advised me yesterday that that you wanted to pull this item for discussion because it does not yet reflect any guidance about how we will change the ways we manage our workplaces as more and more employees and members of the public are vaccinated. And I would readily agree with you that the day is coming when we need to begin to address that and figure out the changes that will bring. Just yesterday, I heard in the news that some limited guidance had come out from CDC that pertained to individuals, but I'm not yet aware of any guidance that's specific to workplaces. I did check in with Anita and Jeff Ryan, our risk manager. We'll certainly watch and bring any guidance that comes down the road into this protocol. But certainly it would be assumed that as more and more people are vaccinated, there will be lessening of restrictions, and people that are vaccinated will be able to be together in ways they have not been able to be safely. Probably the greater issue will be managing employees and members of the public who choose not to be vaccinated and how that can be done.
Thank you very much for that. My main reason for pulling it was to get consensus from the board. Since this is supposed to return to us every 30 days, vaccinations are increasing quickly and actually at a faster rate than before. And so I wanted to make sure to bring that back as soon as possible. And one of the highlights of what I'm looking at that I think needs to be changed is the fact that if you are in contact with somebody that is positive, that you're supposed to quarantine for 10 days. And according to the CDC, that is not a necessary part of moving forward if you are vaccinated. And again, those things may change and be tweaked as we move forward, but just looking to have less than a 30-day process to make sure that when we reopen, which I believe will probably occur in less than 30 days, that we have a document that is also prepared for the new era that we're walking into for COVID-19, where a good majority, not majority, but a good amount of our population is getting vaccinated, as well as our staff. Yes, Supervisor Pyska?
One other thing for us to be contemplating and looking forward to is what type of reporting will employees do if they're vaccinated? And I know that there's difficulties there with HIPAA, but we, as the requirements are expanded or the eligibility is expanded, we're going to have more and more of our employees being vaccinated, and at some point we're going to have to understand who is choosing to do that and who is not.
Any other comments from supervisors on this item? Okay, let's go ahead and open it up to the public. Any comments, questions on item 5.2?
I've sent a unmute request out to the Zoom room floor. If you'd like to make a comment, please unmute and state your first and last name.
All right, let's go ahead and bring it back to the board. I just want to speak to what Supervisor Pyska said. I'm not sure about how that would be done. As you suggested, HIPAA is definitely a privacy right that we can't breach. But what I would like to request is we can tell once we are in a red tier numbers, if it's going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, approximately how long it's going to take before we reopen. And if we can try our best, I don't think it's ever going to be perfect, to come back with a updated version of this protocol about the same time, with updated with vaccination in mind for those protocols. That's the direction I would like to provide, rather than waiting 30 days to go back and review this. Is that a consensus from the board?
I agree.
Okay.
Glad to. Thank you.
Perfect. So then I'm looking for action from the board to go ahead and approve this as is for now, since that little bit of information is still too new to be able to be implemented.
I believe this was for review only. Do we need to do action because we added something, or?
It says approved County of Lake. So,
No, there's no action today. It was review only. It'll stay the same.
perfect.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move on to our item 6.1, public input, our 9:05 a.m. item. If anybody from the public has any comments, questions, or anything for the Board of Supervisors that is not on our agenda today, please speak up. Jake, if we can open up the Zoom room.
All right, I've sent a unmute request out to the Zoom room floor. If you'd like to make a comment, please unmute and state your first and last name.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jake. Let's go ahead and move on to item 6.2, or 9:06 a.m. item, consideration of update on COVID-19. Dr. Pace, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair and the supervisors. Thanks for having us again today. So I'm going to try to be a little bit briefer today. We are, for a quick overview, we are continuing to see improvement in the cases, although we're not yet in the numbers for the red tiers. We are seeing some improvement, and Sarah will show that in just a minute. The vaccines are continuing to roll out. We're getting more vaccine each week now, and so we're putting it out as quickly as we can. And those are, I'll talk a little bit about the variants and about the blueprint changes and about the vaccine today, but maybe Sarah can go first and give an overview of the data.
Good morning, everyone. I have a few slides to share. Statewide, we continue to see positive trends. Testing positivity statewide is down to 2.2%. That's the 14-day average. Testing has continued to decline as well. In California, we've identified 3.5 million cases. The 14-day average continues to decline, not as rapidly as it was in the last couple of weeks, but it does continue to decline. Just 2 days ago, about 3,300 new cases were reported. Over 54,000 deaths to date have been reported in the state of California. We continue to see improvement in the reduction of hospitalized patients and people in the ICU due to COVID, down to about 4,200 people hospitalized yesterday statewide and about 1,100 people in the ICU. In Lake County, as Dr. Pace said, our metrics remain in the purple tier. Later today, it'll be announced that we have a daily case rate of 9.2 per 100,000. This is down from last week. We were about 11 last week, and the week prior we were about 15, so it is declining. And our testing positivity was up slightly from the previous week at 6.3%. Last week it was closer to 5%. The map that I'm showing here were the tier assignments made a week ago. The state will announce the new tier assignments later today. And I imagine seeing a few more counties move into the red tier, though I believe neighbors in Mendocino and Sonoma County will remain in the purple tier like Lake County. And here's the epi curve, which shows us the number of new cases by episode week. So the week making up our tier assignment this week is the week of February 21st through the 27th, whereas of this morning, 48 cases were identified. For the week we just finished, beginning February 28th, we've identified 25 cases. As of today, we'll continue to identify new cases this week as lab reports come in, but we're watching this really closely, hoping to continue to see a decline each week. And just a quick update on progress with vaccines. About 10,100 residents have received one dose. This has been about 800 in the last week, and this is 20% of the Lake County adult population has received one dose. About 5,200 residents have received their second dose, and this is about 1,000 more in the last week, and this is about 10%. This means 10% of the adult population in Lake County has received their second dose. And total doses administered to Lake County residents is about 15,400. And quickly we'll look at vax first doses by age group and race ethnicity. So 51% of people 75 years in age and older have received one dose. That's about 2,700 people. And there's about 5,300 people 75 years of age or older in Lake County. So that's 51% of folks. They make up, this is new from last week, people 75 years of age and older make up 8% of your total population. And that's what this number in this column represents here. So to look at 65 to 74-year-olds, about 3,800 people have received one dose. This is about out of a population of about 9,100 people. So that's 42% of people 65 to 74 have received one dose. and people 65 to 74 make up about 14% of your county population. Over the last week, also saw some improvement, increasing vaccination coverage in some of the younger age groups shown here. 17% of white non-Hispanic residents and 10% of Latino residents have received 1 dose. So we'll start at the top of the table. About 7,600 white non-Hispanic residents have received 1 dose. This is at a population of about 44,400 people. That's 17% of the white non-Hispanic population have received 1 dose. They make up about 69% of the total population in Lake County. About 1,400 people who are Latino have received 1 dose at about 14,200 people, for about 10% of the Latino population in Lake County, and they make up about 22% of the total county population. And just a reminder, as we highlighted last week, the Native American data is not accurate. These data are pulled from one of the state systems that does not include doses administered through Indian Health Service. So I'll just continue to remind folks as we look at these numbers. And that's all I have for the update today.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interrupt for a brief moment, I wanted to make you aware that we're not live on Facebook at this point. Our videographer is investigating what the problem is. There's some sort of error code, and he's working on it right now. So this update that people watching on Facebook are missing part of will be uploaded later, and the videographer is working to restore access right now as well. So I wanted you to be aware of that limitation at this moment.
I'm wondering if Sam knows if he needs 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or is it an unknown situation to diagnose as far as how long it might take to fix?
I believe Sam can hear you, so hopefully he'll respond to that. Sam, are you able to respond?
If it's possible to post a link on our Facebook page to our Granicus so that people can know to look at it there, because I know that a lot of people do watch it through social media. We have a pretty large population of Lake County that is on social media. So just wanted to see if we can at least do that to try to steer people towards where they can see it, because I think this is all one of the reasons why we have so many people watching us every week is for updates such as these.
Yes, I just put in that request to our public information officer, and I also, who's working on this as well, I asked him if he can give us an estimate of how long it's going to take to do the fix, and I'm not getting a reply, which is probably an indicator they're working on it. So I'll keep you posted, but regardless, it will be viewable later. It's not like the video has not been captured.
Right.
But I know how important these reports are to the public, and we apologize for the inconvenience. Not sure what has caused this.
So at this moment, since the Facebook stream is only a one-way stream and not a interaction with us, but the folks here on Zoom are able to interact with us, I'm looking at the board. I'm thinking that we just move on and we make sure that we get that available to everybody once we have that taken care of. Is that okay with everybody on the board? Okay. I got 2 nods and I say yes, so that's good enough. Sorry for the interruption, Sarah and Dr. Pace, but please keep going.
Thank you, and thanks, Sarah, for the information. So I think a couple things to point out there is we are making progress with the vaccines. About 10,000 people have gotten their first doses now in the county, which is really good. And you can see in the vaccine data that the 75-year-olds and above have over 50%, and a lot of that was, that's success, I think, as far as what we were trying to do. We were really trying to target the most vulnerable folks first, and that was done a lot with the help of the senior centers and with the Department of Social Services helping out. And so, that there was a big push within the community to try to get those folks taken care of, and to get half of that part of the community vaccinated is a really good thing. And So the other thing to point out is the number of cases. So, to move into the red tier, there's two pieces of data that are important. One is the test positivity rate, and we've been in the red tier for the test positivity for several weeks now. The other is the case rate. We need to be below 7 per 100,000, which equals about 33 cases per week. We were about 45 last week. We are now at about 28, but there are still some results coming in. So we're getting close. You know, whether we stay under the threshold for this week or not, we don't know. It's still, even if we get in for this week, it's still another week after that. So we're looking at in the next couple of weeks being able to move into the red tier if things continue the way they're going. So the state has made some changes that they are doing around what they call the blueprint, which is essentially the restrictions on business and activity. And once we get to 2 million doses in California in some of the highest risk areas, which they have a very kind of complex definition for, but once we get to 2 million doses, they're going to loosen up some of the restrictions. So the idea is that once more people are vaccinated, the threat is less in the community, and so they'll be able to loosen up some of the restrictions to move from purple to red. We'd be able to do it right about now with the current data. So you know, that's coming, I think, probably within the next month, that they'll get this 2 million threshold, and then they can loosen things up. The other thing is they have started to put out some guidance around outdoor activities, around youth sports and other things like that, especially things that happen outside. They're starting to loosen that up more and allow a little more flexibility. The ones with outdoor like concerts and festivals and stuff will be starting to go into effect April 1st, but it's looser than it was last year. So that's the good news. I think as we've learned more about the way the virus spreads, that there's going to be a little more flexibility with some of the outdoor activities than they were allowing last year. To mention a little bit about the variants, there's no significant developments in our area in the last week. What they're calling the West Coast variant is continuing to spread. The one study that's been done on it seems to indicate that it's less worrisome than we were originally concerned about. So I'm sure there will be more data coming out over the coming weeks, but that was somewhat reassuring. The other ones, the ones that are more worrisome, the variants of concern, they call them, the UK variant, the South African variant, and the Brazil variant. The UK variant is spreading around the state, but we're not seeing the big surge in cases that we were worried about originally. Whether that's going to continue or not, we'll have to see. But so at this point, this week we're a little more reassured than we were the last couple of weeks, and that still remains to be seen how that goes. So to talk about the vaccine, there's a lot of things moving all at the same time. The state is trying to do this whole management process with what they call the TPA, the third-party administrator, via Blue Shield. There's a big struggle going on with that. A lot of the counties are not wanting to sign the contract that they put out. There's been some articles in the papers about it. It looks like the state is going to do this TPA, and so they're just kind of, there's some chess game going on right now about who's going to have responsibility for what, but I'm pretty sure this is going to roll out one way or the other. The My Turn, which is the software platform for appointments and for data sharing and stuff, we're still having a lot of technical issues here in Lake County with it. We're continuing to try to work with them about it, but we're just not having much luck getting things resolved. We were supposed to start next week on the My Turn platform. It still remains to be seen if we're going to have access by then. And so we'll just continue using what we're using until we're able to make the switch. We're mandated to make the switch. And so, they're trying to help us get on, and we're just still working with that. So then the vaccine itself, we're continuing to roll it out. You saw the numbers that Sarah had. It's slower than we want. We're getting somewhere between 1,500 and it looks like this week we'll get 3,000 doses, and that's first and second doses combined. Now we're getting to where we were doing about 1,000 a week a couple weeks ago, and if we only get 2,000 doses, that means we get 1,000 for the second doses and 1,000 for the first doses. So that's why you're seeing kind of the numbers increase slowly but steadily now. We are redistributing some to Sutter and Adventist because their supply chains seem to not be working as well as they were originally. The idea was these big corporate chains were supposed to be supplying all their people with vaccine, but they don't seem to have as much as they thought they were going to have. So we're just we're trying to keep them going as well. The sites are working well. We are able to expand the Lakeport site. It looks like the Clear Lake site is about as much as it's handling about as many people, about 600 a day as possible. We're having to start to consider maybe going to just 1 day in Lakeport and 3 days in Clear Lake, because it seems like we're starting to get a sense that in Lakeport the demand is getting fairly well taken care of, whereas in Clear Lake that's not the case, and so we may have to make a shift now to shift to having an extra day in Clear Lake, but we'll see. We're still kind of trying to feel that out and see how much vaccine we're actually going to get this week. Staffing continues to be an issue. We've hired some more temporary staff, and that's better. But this is just going to be an ongoing issue. Some of our staff are starting to hit the wall in their ability to be able to continue at this pace. The priorities are a big deal, and so the state is continuing with the current priorities. We are totally aligned with the state priorities at this point. So that's 1A, the healthcare workers. Anybody who didn't get done can get done now. The education workers, including preschool and childcare and college folks, and emergency workers. And they've expanded some of that out to include janitors now, disaster service workers for that are people that are helping with congregate living situations or like emergency shelters and things like that, and homeless workers, public transit workers, utility workers. So this is all an expansion from of the definition of emergency workers that the state has done, and it's either on their website now or it's going to be in the next day or two. So these folks are all able to be vaccinated now. They just need to make an appointment just like everybody else. And if there's some question about that, they can go on the state website and see where they fit in. Starting March 5th, which is Monday, people with chronic medical issues that are age 16 to 64 will now be eligible. There's a specific list of the medical issues, but it's fairly vague. What we are really asking people to do is to get a note from their medical provider that says they qualify. The note should say that it should have their name and their date of birth, and to state that from their medical provider that this person qualifies. We don't need to know what the condition is. That's protected and that's not important, but your medical provider should look at the list of the conditions that the state allows and determine whether you make that or not. If somebody does not, and then people will make an appointment on the website. So we haven't opened up next week yet, but once we are sure of our number of vaccine, we'll open up those links. You can go onto our webpage and find a link, open up for an appointment, and it'll ask you how you qualify. You can just say, because of a medical condition, you need to bring in your ID and your letter to the site, and we'll have people at the front gate checking. And if you don't have the letter, we're going to turn you away. If you have a particular extenuating circumstance and you have some other kind of proof of your condition, we'll look at it and try to make a determination then. But there's a lot of people coming in. We've got 500 or so people coming through every day. So, we don't want to back up the lines kind of trying to sort through what people's situation is. It's much better to have some kind of written documentation and do that. The other thing is, if you don't have a medical provider, you can send in your information to our MOAC line, and I'll look at it, make a determination, and make a list of people. So if that's the situation you're doing, you'll have to put your medical situation in the notes so I can actually make the determination. So, you know, it's going to open up the queue a lot larger by adding these folks in, but we definitely want to get these people taken care of. And so if you or your family member falls in that situation, I really encourage you to try to get in touch with your medical provider soon to get the letter. If you have trouble with that, bring in some kind of proof of your medical condition. And it looks like I'll probably be up at the site kind of helping people sort through this. I probably won't be there Tuesday because I'll have to be here, but other days I plan to be there next week. So for appointments, the situation's working okay now. It's better than it was. We're putting the links up on the website as soon as we make the appointments available, and we're basically waiting till we're sure how much vaccine we have. Then we make the appointments and then put the links out. So if you're looking for a first dose appointment, and you're qualified, go on the site and keep looking. We're still, at this point, we're doing a couple days in Lakeport, a couple days in Clear Lake, and we open them up a few days in advance. If you don't have internet access or you can't get on the site, you can call some of the numbers that are on our website. There's one specifically for the seniors, and there's one for farm workers and other folks that are Spanish speakers. And so, you know, we're just continuing to go along like that. The second dose appointments, we're starting to put the links up for those. So we were trying to contact everybody by phone, and we just weren't able to keep up. So we are still trying to get in touch with people, especially people that clearly don't have internet access, but we're emailing about where to get the links, and the links are also on our webpage. You know, we're doing the same thing just a couple days in advance. If you got your first dose, if you have the Moderna, anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks is totally fine. There's no problem if it's 2 weeks late. It's probably no problem if you go much later than that. There doesn't seem to be any real concern about that. But the idea is to try to get it between 4 to 6 weeks after your first dose. There's a lot of talk in the media about the equity issues. So this is the issues of disparity between certain groups having access to the vaccine. The ones that are most at risk from getting problems from COVID are the ones that seem to be getting vaccinated at the lowest rate. So we're trying to do what we can to accommodate those folks and help remove any barriers to getting vaccinated. There's a lot of effort at the state level to try to address this. And one of the things they're focusing on, you may see this in the media, so I just wanted to comment on it briefly, is that they're focusing on the zip codes that are felt to be the highest vulnerable populations in the state. And those zip codes are going to get more vaccine than other zip codes. And so it's a little bit complicated, but basically the idea is, since those people are more at risk from getting the COVID illness, that they're trying to get those areas vaccinated more, and so they're sending more vaccine that way. In Lake County, we have 6 of our zip codes are in that category, so it should lead to a little bit more vaccine for us in the county. We'll see how this actually plays out, but this is kind of what the governor's plan is to help address this. The ethics committee did meet again last week, and I was just going to go ahead and kind of read through their recommendations just so that it's transparent. The committee followed up on earlier requests and considered new requests received since its last meeting. Jail inmates. Consistent with earlier recommendations, the committee recommends vaccine be prioritized for persons living in congregate situations, including jail inmates. So these were responses to specific questions. So the jail inmates, we did get all the inmates that were interested in getting vaccine got vaccinated on Friday, the first dose. Public defenders, the committee requests that public health attempt to attain information on the level of court activity presently taking place to enable further consideration of the impacts of prioritizing vaccine for this group. So this was a request from the public defenders to be considered, and so we've put in a request for how much contact they're having with the public right now, and trying to let the committee make that decision. My understanding is the state has continued to say that court personnel and the lawyers are not in in the emergency worker tier, although some counties went ahead and did it anyhow, but the state's been pretty clear about their guidance, and they were supposed to come with some clarification about it in the near future. Intellectually disabled, medically fragile adults. The committee notes that this group is being prioritized according to state guidance starting March 15th, next Monday. So we talked about that already. Food service and ag workers, responding to an inquiry as to why this group is being prioritized, given that the virus is not known to be passed through food. The committee notes that current indicators show that the spread primarily occurs through face-to-face contact, and this group has been prioritized according to state guidance on this basis. So that's the response to that question that came in. County workers. The committee has considered requests concerning air quality workers, disaster service workers providing sheltering services, and staff to the Emergency Operations Center. The committee notes that according to updated state guidance released 3/1/21, these groups are now eligible for vaccine and should be allowed to begin scheduling appointments. The committee recommends that public health continue to prioritize persons over 65 and ag and food service workers, and if possible, to reserve vaccine appointments for this priority group. So what that's saying is that they're recommending that we open it up to the air quality workers, the disaster service workers who provide sheltering services, and staff to the EOC. And the state now has opened that up as well. So they've clarified that in some of their guidance. So that is happening now. So if people fall in that group, they can go ahead and get appointments. Clergy. There was a request for a certain clergy that we're having a lot of contact with the public. The committee recommends that vaccine be prioritized for clergy who, in the normal course of their duties, regularly visit hospitals, jails, nursing homes, hospice patients, elderly, ill patients, mortuaries, and have frequent contact with the community in general, including ag workers. So the clergy that meet that qualification can go ahead and sign up as well. Summary, the committee continues to reaffirm its earlier recommendations, focusing on persons most at risk of death. Continue to prioritize vaccine to 65 plus and ag workers with emphasis on outreach and addressing logistical details impacting these populations. Continue to offer vaccine to new persons at homeless shelters, food service workers, i.e. grocers and restaurants. C2C above for updated recommendations, which I mentioned. The committee continues to acknowledge that the situation is very fluid and anticipates that its recommendations will change with each passing week. So again, if people have questions or concerns that they want the committee to take into advisement, they can send it into the MOOC email and we'll pass it along. And I think that's really the end of what I wanted to talk about today. You know, overall, we are continuing to be optimistic that things are improving. It's looking like we will be able to move in the red tier in the coming weeks, and vaccine is continuing to roll out. It looks like the supply will at least continue at this level, and the thinking is probably in about a month it's going to considerably increase. One thing I didn't mention is we do have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has arrived. We are going to be administering it on Thursday. So if people feel like that, we don't really feel like there's any advantage of the Pfizer versus the Moderna versus the Johnson & Johnson, except for the Johnson & Johnson is only one dose. So if somebody's in a group where they would benefit from just having, you know, that they aren't going to be around next month, or they're in a very mobile population, or there's somebody who has a lot of trouble leaving the house and to get the second dose is a real hardship, they should go ahead and sign up for this Thursday if they qualify. But, you know, so we're seeing these things expand. The vaccine rollout is doing pretty well. These shifts with the state taking over things and sort of trying to implement new software and things are going to be a little tricky to navigate. But overall, we are, as much vaccine as we're able to get, we're getting it into people's arms, and it's going as fast as we possibly can at this point. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pace. Before I open it up for the rest of the board, just real quick, is it possible to put that those ethics committee recommendations online to make it very transparent and open to the public to read and view?
Sure, you want us to put it on the website?
I think that would be really useful for everyone to be able to read through it rather than just having to listen to it or maybe read it through the media. I think having the direct message from the committee, I think would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Supervisor Crandall.
Dr. Pace, thank you for the report. Just wanted to touch base. I reached out to Ernesto Padilla from Tribal Health. I wanted to see if you were able to get in contact with them. He said he could share the numbers that they have for vaccinations. I'm not sure if that took place or if you need any help facilitating that.
Well, again, he had shared the numbers with me once before. Let me see, but they don't register at the state level.
Mm.
And so we don't get credit for them, even if so we can pat ourselves on the back for having that much more of the population vaccinated, which is great. But let's see, I can find what I have gotten from him. But it's in terms of the state parameters, it's not going to change anything unless it goes in through their one portal, which is through the care system, the vaccine state thing. So
we need to figure out how we can get the state to inject that information into their system so we can get credit for it. Okay.
Yeah, and Ernesto and I had some contact last week, actually after the board meeting, and he said his people are working on. I think this is a statewide issue. It's not just our local tribal clinic. It's a problem with everybody that's doing it through Indian Health. But in our county, we're probably one of the counties where it's the most significant because Tribal Health has done such a great job. I mean, I think they've done 1,000 folks. And so, we're only getting credit for 10,000 so far. So that's 10%. So that's a significant number of vaccine in a small county like ours. So I'll see if I can find what he said.
Okay.
I think the last situational report that we got, Dr. Bayer, Mr. Chair, if I could intervene on this, I think the numbers were up to 1,500, from Tribal Health, both native and non-native. I did put out a request to essentially it'd be great to have those numbers directly here each week. I did put out a request to Ernesto also. I don't know if he can join today, but he may not be able to. But I will say that last week, I know myself was on a call with Carrie West of CDPH. I think she also talked to some other members, but this was a main question asking about those numbers. And from the conversation with Carrie West of CDPH, the government affairs, this is one that hopefully, whether we like the answer or not, hopefully we'll have an answer by Wednesday, what the problem is and how we can move forward with hopefully trying to solve that. Because ultimately, like you said, we want credit. Everybody's working hard locally on the ground here, and we want to make sure that those numbers are getting at the state level. So I know I had a call on Friday afternoon. I think she spoke with at least one other board member to talk about the rollout. And, so hopefully we'll have some answers to that here sooner than later.
Thank you, Moak.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Supervisor Pyska.
When we move to the My Turn app, which I think we're going to have to, is there going to be geofencing incorporated in the application to kind of prevent the vaccine tourism that we've experienced?
Well, this is a big issue. So what the state has reluctantly conceded to is that through March, we will be able to exclude people from out of county. After March 31st, I guess, they are not going to allow that to happen anymore. And so the idea is that they want to remove all obstacles from people getting vaccinated. So I'm not aware of geosensing or anything like. My understanding is that there's not good ways to incorporate this into the software, but they have some mechanisms where we can set aside specific small clinics to sort of only allow it to be with people in the county. But at the big sites, we're still going to have to allow it, and it's a little bit of a gray zone for the rest of the month. But by the time we get on, that's probably only going to be 2 weeks. I think what their thought process is that there's going to be enough vaccine, it's not going to matter that much anymore. But it doesn't. There's a disconnect between what they're doing, focusing on equity and focusing on the hardest to reach people, and then allowing everybody to come in. So because the folks with the best transportation, the best internet access are the ones that are going to get the appointments first. So it's, I think it's different parts of the system trying to do different things, and it doesn't line up, and it's a problem for Lake County.
So we've got 3 weeks basically before this can open up to anybody that wants to come here again.
Well, right now we're doing it through the old system.
Right.
So, and once we go to my turn, which probably will be next week if we work out some of the kinks, there will be some ability to screen folks out and some ability not to. And then at least the current guidance is that starting April 1st, that we won't be able to limit.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, but how many extra doses are we getting because we have the impacted zip codes?
It's not exactly clear. They're not able to give us that number at this point. This has been a very rapid rollout, and the people, I'm on calls with some pretty high level folks in charge of the vaccine stuff, but they don't seem to have that kind of numbers.
I believe that it was 40% of the state's vaccines would go directly to those zip codes, but it's not a specific number.
Right, and then in each zip code, they're basically doubling it if they're high-risk zip codes. So if, for example, if one of the zip codes, so we've got 6 of them, but some of them are very small numbers of people in it, and then they sort of determine what they think the allocation for that zip code should be, and if it's one of the high-risk zip codes, they'll double it. But how much actual vaccine is that's going to mean, how much additional vaccine that means we're going to get, they don't seem to be able to tell us that at this point.
Well, I know we still continue to have people coming into our county to get vaccinated.
Absolutely.
Their
Absolutely.
addresses and.
Well, yeah, and part of what's, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead. I'm really concerned that we're not going to be able to continue on this trajectory after the 1st of April.
Well, I think there's a lot of, what you're pointing at is how well we're able to turn people away at the front gate of the vaccine site, right? So whether somebody's a farm worker or not, we're requesting, proof of their work. We're requesting proof of their address, but we're not catching everybody. Or people will say they have a second home up here, and so we're letting them do that. What's going to happen next week is this whole thing with the medical conditions. We're requesting these notes from their medical providers, but it's going to be really hard for most people to get that by Monday, and so we're going to be making there's a line of 50 cars trying to get into the drive-in theater. And our poor folks are trying to determine who qualifies, whether they have a reservation, are they trying to scam us and all that. And when we tried to turn people away before, it was fairly challenging in some ways. And so we're doing the best we can. And so far, our people have done a great job. But yeah, it's gonna increase in complexity and intensity in the coming weeks for sure. And what we're trying to do is kind of rely on the honor system to a large extent. And that works until it doesn't,
Thank you.
Supervisor Scott?
I definitely see that California, there's a complete disconnect if they're realizing we have high-risk areas and they're giving more vaccine to those areas, but anybody living, anywhere around can go into those areas and get the vaccine. That's just mind-boggling that's even going on. But actually, my question is, I have one group, our foster parents that are here in the county. I know they have a lot of turnover in their home. Do they fit into any of these groups to be able to be vaccinated?
That's a good question. I think they, so they did do some expansions. Let's see. Certified family homes, children's residential community care facilities. So
You can get back to me on that one. I just know we already struggle here in Lake County with having enough foster homes for our children, and they're sent out of county. So I would hate for families to be waiting to get vaccinated to bring in another child into their home and then having another child be sent out of county. So I just wanted to speak up for that group. But thank you for your.
I'll let you know.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Chair,
I saw that Ernesto Padilla. Yeah, I saw Ernesto Padilla from Tribal Health coming on. Thank you, Supervisor Simon, for mentioning that. Since we've been speaking about Tribal Health, Mr. Padilla, would you like to speak to us about the status of the vaccine rollout through Tribal Health?
Yes, thank you, Supervisor. So, good morning, everyone. I just want to provide a little update on the vaccines and how we've been rolling it out at Tribal Health. As everyone may or may not know, we opted to receive our vaccines directly from the IHS instead of it going through the state and then down through the county and then to us. So today, this as of last week, we inoculated about 487 vaccines to natives and 1,071 to non-natives. And this is all Moderna. We've held 2 mass vaccination clinics on February 20th and 27th, where we inoculated current Tribal Health patients that were 50 years of age and over. We have already inoculated all the natives 18 and over that wish to have the vaccine before these mass vaccination clinics. So we started with the local consortium members, natives, went down the priority phase for them, and then any natives in Lake County that are our patients that were over 18. So once we exhausted those patients from the list, and we were calling them and making appointments, we opened it up to our non-native patient population, and that's when we had rolled out the mass vaccination clinic. So since it was a Moderna, they received the initial one on February 20th. We'll have another clinic on March 20th where they'll get their second vaccine, 28 days later. And then the same for the clinic on the 27th of February. The second vaccine will come in on the 27th of March. This 13th of March, or this Saturday coming up, we will have our another mass vaccination clinic, and this will be for new patients. Will be the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and we'll be rolling that out to our patients that are 40 years of age and over or have chronic illnesses. So that's where we're at. We've received about 500 of the Janssen, so this will make it easier for the stand downs or mass vaccination clinics, since we won't have to schedule a second one for these people to come through. At those clinics, I think we vaccinated like 200 on the first one, 300 on the second one, and we expect our goal is to get 500 this Saturday.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Padilla. Any questions or comments directly to Tribal Health Director Padilla before we move on?
I'd just like to thank you, Ernesto. I know it was a last-minute request to join today. I want to thank you for the work being done for our native and non-native population, and I know you have been coordinating excellent with Dr. Gary Pace from the beginning of this, so I want to thank both of you for the work to be done for our constituents here locally. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. And just an update, I know our numbers weren't being reported up to the California Immunization Record System, but we fixed that bug yesterday. It was the way that they were being put into our electronic health records, so they should be rolling up, and those numbers should be included in the aggregate for our county.
That's great news.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all.
Any further questions or comments from the supervisors? So I had a few questions. Dr. Pace, I know that it seems every week we're seeing social media posts saying we have extra vaccines or extra appointments available. Are you able to fill up all those appointments? Are you finding yourself with some leftover vaccine at the end of the week? How is that working for us at this moment?
So what's happening is we are not having extra vaccines. So what we do is we're getting a certain amount every week and we're using it all up. Partly what's happening is, like, if we yesterday we had some extra slots that didn't get filled. It doesn't mean we lose vaccine. We don't open the vaccine up until we have the people there. So it's basically then that vaccine is saved and we either redistribute it to somebody else or we use it in some of the later on in the week. So it's not that that's a lost opportunity. It's that it's available. If the demand is there, people can get in. And but if they don't come in, we're not losing vaccine. We're just moving it to either someplace else or later in the week.
And maybe I misstated my question, but is there any leftover vaccine at the end of the week? Are we still able to utilize all of that we've received and then waiting for more the following week?
We're not exactly the week because our shipments are on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we don't have any in storage. We're using it all up as we go. And if we have a little bit extra, but Sutter's not getting some or Adventist isn't getting some, we're in touch with them and working with them. Or if we get extra, we'll send it to Safeway or, so we're working with the community partners and it's going out into the community and getting into people's arms one way or the other.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I know that some counties are struggling while some counties are doing great. And I think we're in the latter where we're actually able to get rid of all of our vaccines. I've heard of some counties still having about 30% at the end of the week left over because they haven't formalized their vaccine clinics quite yet. So right now you're doing food and agriculture as well as everything previous to that. Does that include restaurants? Because I know I read not a long time ago, but a couple months ago that the number one profession that's been hit by COVID is chefs because they're in tight quarters. There's not much for social distancing, just making sure and checking in to see if restaurants are part of the food and agriculture process.
Right. Any of the things where people are preparing or dealing with food, with feeding the public, basically, is included in that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I did ask because what Supervisor Paiska brings up is something that is of concern to me as well. Obviously, I've been vocalizing the issue of us utilizing the limited amount of vaccines for our populations. It's never going to be 100% watertight, but I think we've been doing a good job of trying, but I think the state is doing things that are going to really test us to be able to get those vaccines to our population. I asked the state what measures they put in place for sending more vaccines for the highest risk to ensure that those actually do get to the highest risk. And we have an elevated risk population. And I want to make sure that it gets to those people. Are we going to be checking zip codes? How are we because it's basically they're sending it to public health. There's nothing the state that I believe from what they've told me that they are putting into place to ensure. So it seems that it gets the responsibility of ensuring it gets to the right folks is landing on public health. What is our process to ensure that the truly vulnerable that we're receiving these vaccines for are being sought out and receiving the vaccines?
Well, this is part of the strategy of planning on moving an extra site down to an extra day down at the Clear Lake end of the lake. That's where there's more demand that we have not been able to fill down at that end of the lake, and there's more folks that are more vulnerable down at that end of the lake. In terms of the zip codes, there's more of the population in those vulnerable zip codes at that end of the lake, and there's fewer outlets, so Lakeview Clinic's done some, Tribal Health has done some vaccines, Sutter's been very good about getting out there, and Safeway has done it, but all at the other end of the lake. And then down at the Clear Lake end of the lake, it's us and Adventist. And when the shipments dried up because of the weather in the Midwest, that impacted the Clear Lake end of the Clear Lake sites more. And the site that we're using to vaccinate people doesn't expand as well to accommodate more people. That in Lakeport we can probably do 1,000 a day there just in terms of space. At the Redbud Park we're not able to do that, and especially there's concerns now about the fishing tournaments and not interfering with the docks and all that kind of stuff. So what we're trying to do is figure out how to expand the site over there to get more vaccine out for folks. And so that's one piece. The other piece is we're trying to get better outreach into the Latino community through the Lake County Office of Education folks, and also just see if there's transportation needs. The Lake County Transit is willing to take people to the vaccine sites for free. So there's some different things like that going on, but that's the state says they're going to help us, and they ask what kind of resources we need, but nothing really has been forthcoming at this point. So I think you're right. I think it is pretty much on us to do that, and so part of it is to try to get the community partners that are connected with these communities to help us get them appointments and get them in.
So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the wanting to expand in Clear Lake. And yeah, you are accessing a much larger population. You have Clear Lake Oaks right nearby, more accessible to folks from Middletown and Hidden Valley and Lower Lake as well, than going all the way to Lakeport. What I want to ask is, again, it's the access to our vaccine, because it literally is our vaccine. We're being seen as a jurisdiction, and they're sending it to us. What is the amount of work needed to find out approximately how many people from out of county are coming through attempting to get it? Because I'm going to be honest, I'm leaning towards, should we be asking these counties to pay us for your time? Because we're receiving vaccines for our people, but yet we're utilizing our staff to vaccinate people that should go to their counties to get that. And I'm just wondering if the numbers are large enough that it's, yes, that's something we should be discussing, or if the numbers are small enough that it's just not even worth the time to even do that. I'm just kind of curious if it's possible to bring us those numbers next time approximately, because I don't expect anyone to count specifics, just so that we have a better idea, because I want your time to be used in the most efficient manner for our community to get the need that they need. And this is just a hurdle that I don't see us winning on our end. I think that with the lack of resources that many of our folks have, that in the competition with surrounding counties who have more resources, we're going to end up getting further and further behind. So just a thought. I did also have the same conversation that Supervisor Simon had with Carrie West. Appreciated her calling and asking questions. I do want to say to Ernesto Padilla, very happy to hear about how much Tribal Health is reaching out to the community. We are the only county with a tribal health facility that is reaching out to non-natives right now for vaccinations. And I couldn't appreciate that more, because it's really about the whole community and how quickly we can get the vaccination out there. And the fact that they're helping out like that is tremendous for all of us. Vaccination sites, you said about possibly adding one in Clear Lake and taking one away from Lakeport. While I don't disagree with that at all, I'm wondering, is it a huge burden to look at? And I know that Blue Shield will bring this, and this is why I bring this up. We spoke with Carrie West about Blue Shield a lot, about setting one up in the Lucerne area or setting one up in the Middletown area, where right now those who don't have transportation may have struggles to reach the areas.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly this is suboptimal in terms of getting some of the folks in other places in the county. And, ideally we would set up a mobile site and have a mobile unit that goes around to different places. We're requesting that when we do these reports to the state and to the TPA and all that. And, I find it, I think it'll be a while before we get that kind of support, but we are asking for it. Again, like I mentioned last week, we are actually staffing these 4 days of sites, and you can see what the weather looks like today. People are going to be outdoors. There's 25 to 30 people we're getting to staff every day for 4 days a week. So it's basically 25 to 30 full-time jobs of people, who most of them have other responsibilities. And it's a huge lift. And now we're starting to bring in some of the temp folks, and we've got a little bit of the structure set up so that it's going. And then, we were initially hoping to do some of these mobile sites, but I think we're going to be doing these sites for the next 3 or 4 months. And so it's really a huge staffing need. And with all these changes going, we need people who are pretty nimble and pretty able to help make the moves to what the next thing is, and then to start staffing other sites in Lucerne and in Middletown. We're struggling to do what we're doing now, and to add more is probably not very realistic unless we get some more help.
And supposedly, from what Carrie West was telling me, that's what the TPA will be here for, is to get hard to reach populations. So hopefully they can do that. They also mentioned that they are not here to take over public health. They will be here as a collaborator to provide assistance in making sure that we are doing everything we can. And also that they would be most likely happy that we have an ethics committee, and possibly want to be a part of that or something of the kind, depending on what your thoughts are on that. But those were the levels of conversation that I had with Carrie West. And as of yesterday, also in my CSAC phone call with the state, not only are we looking at the lowest health metrics zip codes for extra vaccine, but I had submitted the same data about 2 weeks ago to the state, and I provided that to you as well, Dr. Pace, that those that had the most deaths and the most case rates of COVID seem to not have the highest levels of vaccination. And now the state, as of yesterday, is looking to provide higher levels of vaccines to the hardest hits counties in the state. So hopefully our equity stuff will be a lot better, because it hasn't been perfect, but I don't think it ever will be either. I think that's all the questions that I have on here. I appreciate you talking about folks who don't have a primary doctor, how they can still go through the process and to get an appointment. I think that's an important thing to know. So I appreciate that. And again, I'm done. If there's any other comments or questions from the board.
Final comment, obviously, in a conversation I had with Carrie West, again, Dr. Pace, I want to thank you and all the volunteers and the staff at Public Health and all the other disaster workers that we have on. I know, as you say, it's stretched really thin, but those clinics are going very well. Nothing but positive feedback that has come, especially with our senior communities. Every day somebody just got their second shot. We're very impressed as it's gone on. And I know that it's volunteers and folks that just care about our community. So today, once again, I just want to say thank you very much to your department and all the volunteers that are helping roll out this vaccine distribution and everything that's happening. I know it's not, it's not perfect. I know we don't have enough staff, but you guys are doing a great job. And I just want to thank everybody for their hard and dedicated work to our Lake County constituents.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Crandall, did you have something as well?
Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks again to Dr. Pace for all the work you're doing and the communication that you're having with the tribal health and whatever you can with the state. I know it's frustrating. I know I had a meeting a couple of weeks back with the community about some situations when it comes to the North Shore and crime and things like that. And the courts are backed up, and so I know the ethics committee that's put together is thinking about different ideals and people to make sure that they're vaccinated. But I don't know if they're talking about this or not, but I just wanted to put it out there that the courts are backed up, and some of the people that are abusing the system are knowing that they'll get cited and released. And so I don't know if there's if it's because of not having personal court or whatever the case may be. I just know that they're postponing it. So if there's any way we can get that recognized and worked on so that we could start mitigating that number of criminal activity, because I know people are just taking advantage of it. They're getting out going and reoffending and knowing they're just going to be cited and released. And so, but I know we're barely gaining traction. I'm not trying to push this forward as like do it right now. I just want to make sure that it's in people's mind that that's part of what's going on when it comes to some of the dumping and some of the leaving the cars, all of those different attributes that happens in criminal activity in Lake County. There's a group of people that understand that, hey, I'll just get cited and released, so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. So if there's any way we could start, inching in somehow, whatever we can do to get either the defense attorneys or victim witness or whoever works with this public aspect, any type of offers for vaccinations.
Thank you very much. I do have one question to the board and one last comment to Dr. Pace, maybe as an idea to bring to the ethics committee if you agree with this. I know that some other counties, actually it might have been out of state, for people that don't have transportation, for people that are very isolated, that they were saying that if you give them a ride to get a vaccination, not only will they get the vaccination, but you can get the vaccination as well for helping somebody that's vulnerable to get to the vaccine clinic. So not sure if that's something that you think would be a good idea to make sure that we can reach to those hard to get folks, but just wanted to put that thought out there for you to just play around with. And then lastly, I did ask Dr. Pace, and I don't want to direct Dr. Pace without consensus from the board. I asked him about collecting rough data on how many people from out of county are coming through. Is that something you guys would like to see as well, or is that something that we just drop it right here? I see one nod.
We need to keep paying close attention to that.
I agree. Definitely. If the state is prioritizing vaccine for our hard hit areas, but then to let anybody come in, that's defeating the purpose of that. So.
Okay. So perfect. I just wanted that consensus rather than directing Dr. Pace, and hopefully just a quick slash on a page to help keep track is as simple as it gets. And I hope that we didn't ask for something that's adding more difficulty and burden to those that are working hard at the vaccine clinics to get people through and done.
Well, I did just want to make a comment, because every request we do make, as it was just said, does add one more step and one more process for the volunteers. And I understand tracking those numbers through the state system, another thing, but the reality is every time we make a request to this board, we just talked about it. We have volunteers that have been working hard. Every time we do it, it's another step and another process that has to happen, at the vaccine clinic. So the reality is, can't say I hope this isn't another step, because it is adding another step to the process. I just want that clarified.
Right. Well, I still hope it's as simple as it can get, as it can be. It is a step, yes. Does that change any of the consensus of the board to still request for that information?
If it's simple, I think we need this information to be able to fight for our community, making sure that our community is getting vaccinated and not outsiders. Because I know that there's many people that will drive here to be able to get a vaccine if they're able to, and we need to make sure we're taking care of our community.
Okay. We also have to have the data to back it up. If we're going to be going to the state and saying this is happening and we need to remedy it, we have to have that data.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jake, let's go ahead and open up the Zoom room. Thank you for your patience, everybody, as we've gone through our deliberation. Anybody with a question, comment, suggestion, anything?
All right, I've sent a unmute request out to the Zoom room floor. If you would like to make a comment, please unmute and state your first and last name.
We must have answered all of their questions. Okay, let's go ahead and bring it back to the board. Any further comments or questions before we move on?
No, just thank you, Dr. Pace, for everything you do.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Pace, for your report, and to Sarah as well. I did appreciate that she added the percentages on there that I requested last week. That helps out. And we will see you next week, and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a 9:45 a.m. item 6.3, consideration of presentation from Illumination Technologies California, and B, direction to staff to review existing county sites for use as tower locations. Supervisor Pyska.
Illuminations Technologies is based in Calistoga, and I've seen several of their presentations over the past months. This technology could, bring more sirens to our community, very high level fire detection, early detection, as well as increase our network and bring in redundancies with cellular coverage and broadband coverage, which all of those things we desperately need. So Chris Canning is the CEO of Illumination Technologies and also the mayor of Calistoga. So Chris, welcome and thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. I appreciate all of your time. Yep, I'm your neighbor over in Calistoga. Thank you for your time. I will keep this as quick as I can. I know some of you have met with other colleagues of mine, Richard Boissel, who lives up in the Cobb area, and has been a long-time resident of Lake County. And then all of my other colleagues, we're all from this area, with the exception of one who works with us out of Miami, but he's super smart, so we're allowing him to help us out on this side of the country now and then. And that's George Moreno. I'm going to share a screen to help us through the conversation, if that's okay with you. And if you guys can see that, just give me a thumbs up.
Yep, popped up.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as Supervisor Pyska mentioned, we are located over in Calistoga. We were established in October of 2018, but we are part of a larger company that's been around for just about 20 years, doing the type of work that I'm going to talk to you about here. We have our primary basis is the telecom industry. We build infrastructure to support telecom. But our point of difference is that on that same infrastructure, or as a result of that same infrastructure, we are able to provide public safety benefits to different communities around the world. We currently operate in 22 different countries. We have just over 4,800 telecom structures throughout the world. We are considered by the FCC as a passive infrastructure provider. We are not officially a telecom company, but we support those telecom companies through the work we do. Kind of our products and services, what we bring into a community is a turnkey concept, both to the communities and also to the telecom providers. So from soup to nuts, engineering, design, licensing, permits, etc. One of the advantages we do offer, because we are not a telecom company, is co-location. So on the infrastructure we present to a community, multiple carriers can occupy that space, versus each of the carriers, whether it be an AT&T, a Verizon, or a Sprint, having their own infrastructure spread throughout a relatively small geography. And we do multi-purpose infrastructure, so that, if you're going to put something in a community, take up some space, it's going to serve multiple purposes. The biggest point of difference that we offer is the fact that we go and partner with communities first, prior to partnering fully with telecom. We all know the challenges that public agencies have with telecom carriers, and we all know the challenges telecom carriers have with public agencies. I could speak to that firsthand. But what we do is we come in, partner with the public agency, in this case would be the County of Lake, and find out what their greatest needs are, what their greatest public concerns are, and then also see if they have or would they benefit from improvements to their telecommunications. Once we have established those communities and what their needs are, we go out to the telecommunications companies, the AT&Ts and Verizons of the world, and see if there is a business interest on their behalf to be in those areas or service those communities. One of the questions asked is, why would a carrier, an AT&T, a Verizon, et cetera, or a US Cellular, want to have us build their infrastructure versus them? And the simple reason is that it's a balance sheet exercise. If a US Cellular or an AT&T builds their own, that's capital expenditure, which shows up very differently on their balance sheet to their shareholders. When they lease someone else's structure, that being ours, it comes from a different side of their balance sheet and reflects a different image or portrayal to their shareholders. So very transparent about the fact and very upfront, we are a privately held for-profit company that services telecommunications, but also, as mentioned, our point of difference, it offers public safety benefits to communities that on their own would want this but may not be able to afford it. So we secure locations in the community in the public right of way. That's the community's give, if you will. We purchase, install, and maintain the public safety benefits, and that's all paid for through the leasing of that infrastructure to telecom. Some of the benefits are, it improves the telecommunications within a community, in this case, within your county. We all know that on a daily basis, telecommunications networks can be frustrating, but that's extremely critical infrastructure during an emergency. And we have all shared more than our fair share of these challenges. It is also a community-wide or county-wide detection system that we're suggesting, an alert system. And again, because there is no financial contribution by the public agency, by the county, there is no impact to already stressed budgets. And again, there's no financial contribution, but we are not, ignoring the fact that what you're offering up is access to your public right of way. Some of the public safety solutions that we will bring will have all of the elements included in them. Like I said, from the acquisition of the technology to the installation and to its maintenance for the lifetime of an agreement. Most of our agreements with public agencies run 30 years. And we have things that we've offered in other communities around the world and now in the US. Early wildfire detection, which we'll talk about momentarily, fiber, public Wi-Fi in some communities, smart LED lighting, CCTVs, LPRs, which are license plate readers, and flood sensors. The vast majority of our business globally is done in the video surveillance realm because of the areas we operate in those countries. Some of them have crime concerns. That's not what we're offering here, unless that's something of interest. We have different concepts around the planet that we work on. Our ecological islands, which are basically free public Wi-Fi in community parks. I mentioned video surveillance, bringing drinking water to areas that are concerned. And then more to the left of this slide is the natural hazard issues in the early wildfire detection. Our monopoles or our infrastructures, and when we say, if you hear me use the word tower, that could be something as short as 18 feet all the way up to 60 feet. We do the best job we can to camouflage them. As we joke, we have the prettiest ugly cell towers that you'll find out there. But we do, because we're working at the front end with the public agency, we are very sensitive to aesthetics and placement. This is an example for those of you that do commute across from Lake County over to Sonoma County. If you use Petrified Forest Road, this is one of our structures you'll see. The only difference on this photo is there is actually a siren that sits at the top of it. This photo is taken just before the siren was hoisted. And again, it's an effort to try to have it blend in. As you come up the hill, there is some shadowing from other trees that helps it along. But this is just a real live example of what we have that you'll see if you head up Petrified Forest Road out of Calistoga into Santa Rosa. So we do not design any of our own technology. We go out into the world and find who creates or who's invented or who utilizes the best technology for a particular problem. And no surprise to you, and it's the same issue on this side of the mountain over in Napa County, as well as Sonoma County and Marin County, who we're working with. Wildfire is a massive issue, and it's year after year after year. And I have 5 other slides we could talk about. Is this going to be a problem in California in the future? And the very short answer is absolutely. So what we have to do is help mitigate for these challenges that we're going to be facing for decades. And one of the first things we said is, early detection is critical no matter who you talk to in what element of fire safety or fire mitigation. When you talk about early detection, that has to happen. So we partnered with a German company. They're based in Berlin. They've been doing this for 20 years. They're called IQ Firewatch. On your free time, which I know is rare, Google them. you'll see that they started just over 20 years ago. They were a collaboration with the European Space Agency to design a technology and a sensor concept that they've now commercialized and have been using throughout the world on Earth. They've got 11 different countries. This technology, these sensors cover 15 million acres. And its biggest point of difference relative to Alert Watch, which is out there, covers your county as well as ours. The biggest difference is this is artificially intelligence-driven processing 24/7 of 3 different types of technologies, constantly overlapping and overlaying so that it can detect at its earliest stage the ignition of a fire. And its difference from an infrared system, for example, which is the state is testing now, is an infrared detection system requires a pretty significant heat source at the base for it to be detected up high, or that flames or fire actually have to be in the crown of trees. And as you all know, that by the time it's in the crowns of the trees, you're off to the races and it's kind of late. This technology actually detects, in its simplest terms, smoke, whether it's day or night. And basically it's a disturbance that's created by the burning greenery below up into the atmosphere that this detection device finds. And artificial intelligence will continue to look at it, scan the horizon, and when it detects something, it alerts a human. So this all goes back to a monitoring center that's operated and personed 24/7. The device or the technology tells the human, hey, there might be something to consider. The human looks at that data and then determines, hey, this is worth checking out further, and then alerts the closest fire authority. Currently, the monitoring center is in Berlin, but we've actually secured a monitoring center that'll be operating out of Arizona for our U.S. operations. So it is a little bit closer to home. Richard Boissel, who's on the line, and hopefully he's been unmuted. He, as I mentioned, is our project manager and engineer. And this is near and dear to his heart because he is a resident up in Cobb. He's going to talk to you about the locations being recommended in this particular part of Lake County. So Richard, if you're there, just kind of give a quick overview of how they determine where these should go in these particular sites.
All right.
And so, there we go.
So we reached out to IQ Firewatch, and we start with, where would be the ideal location to cover the most amount of geography. So we reached out, and on the next slide, we'll show what these typical proposed sites would cover. And that's the area that IQ would show that he just switched to there. As I said, these are proposed sites. There could be more, and if we found a proper location, we've been able to do some rearranging that it might be less or more, depending upon which sites we were able to get to, because a lot of these end up being mountainous sites. And in saying that, just so you're aware, what we're currently working on is complete solar, complete battery backup, and whether that be satellite link or microwave as a backhaul. So they're freestanding alone units that can be placed generally anywhere. But we run into a lot of private properties in that regard. So this is the overview of the coverage that IQ Firewatch has sent back to us. And that's pretty sizable chunk of Lake County there. There's a few more to be looked at, but this would be the general overview of it.
Thank you. The second phase of this, so detection, as we all know, is important. Early detection, first to get people out of the way, protect life safety, and second to be able to get resources to the source of that fire before it becomes much larger. In the detection system, because there are multiple cameras that cross-reference, when in a report, after it goes from the AI to the human monitoring center, when that report is given to the local fire authority, they're issued actual images, exact coordinates. This system can detect within 3 meters of the source of a fire or the ignition point of a fire, so it's about 10 feet of where that is, which helps considerably in applying those resources directly. The second part of, after you've detected it and you're hopefully rolling resources to that, is to alert people. And I know that there are already several siren systems or sirens throughout different parts of Lake County. And we're looking to parlay that part of another company we partner with because we believe them to be the best in the business is Federal Signal. And we use as an example here their model 2001-130, which is a very high powered device that is rotating. We actually have these installed in northern Napa County, specifically over the city of Calistoga. There's five of these. High decibel output, similar to IQ Firewatch. We all know that we can't rely on PG&E power all of the time. As of late, not most of the time. So these are solar power battery backup alert systems. Important point, these cannot be activated by the artificial intelligence driven detection systems. A human being actually has to make that decision. And that decision is left up to the local public safety officials. It's not something that we do. It's not something that IQ Firewatch does or Federal Signal. It's whoever the public safety agency is. Richard, if you want to give a note as to these particular locations.
Okay, so we've worked with several of the chiefs around the lake, Chief Duncan, Chief Wink, Chief Sulpatus, and we've looked at all of these locations, and this would be the coverage for the sirens. It would reach a little bit farther than that, but we're talking about 80, 75, and 70 decibels, 80 being just to the outside of the yellow ring, 75 just to the outside of the blue ring, and 70 just outside of the green ring. If you're around any of the sirens, you have a pretty good idea of what the coverage is of them if they're properly placed. And this would go right into the sirens that are already in place within the county. We visited all these locations. We've gone back and forth with the chiefs, and this is what we've come up with so far.
There we go. Thank you. This next slide here, which piggybacks onto the decibel range of the sirens, now incorporates, as mentioned, the cell coverage or cellular signal, RF signal that we believe would be presented from these. Richard, do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, so I've overlaid I've used 2 miles as range. That propagation over water is a little bit farther, but along the Riviera side, you would get coverage from the opposite side of the lake, and this would just fill in a lot of coverage holes, and would just greatly help out the community all the way around. So this is what that would generally look like in these locations.
No surprise, there hasn't been any community that we've gone into and done an RF analysis on that would not benefit from enhanced cell coverage. And certainly, you all know your community better. There are certain gaps and issues in cell coverage. Again, this model works because the cell carriers would be interested. We have already spoken to kind of the 3 biggies in your part of the world. And while there is interest, they need to know that there's support, because there tends to be challenges whenever cell companies try to come in. But again, the difference is we're offering this via the use of utilization of public safety benefits, which is very different than what carriers tend to do, which is not offer local communities very much at all, if anything. Let's see if this will let me go to the next slide. Richard?
So in this slide, these are proposed locations of cell coverage where we are lacking cell coverage here in this county. Obviously, there's a number of other places. These are the first ones that come to mind. we looked at the Lucerne Fire Department as one of the sites, and there's already a Verizon site that's on that location. But generally speaking, these are the initial proposed site locations that would most quickly and greatly help out the community, especially along the 29 corridor. It's a long process for that new highway project to get done, but we all know what the coverage is there, and even coming into Kelseyville and even around the corner into Lakeport. Clear Lake is also another area that could use some help, and this is an overlay of the IQ sites along with the fire stations and a couple other locations that would be proposed as well.
So with that said, trying to keep it short and sweet and respect your time, that's the overall concept that we have here. We do have a project in front of the County of Napa, which is going to consist of 8 IQ early fire detection systems and 21, I believe, telecom sites to fund that. We're also speaking with Sonoma County, Marin County, and then there's a couple of cities and towns in Southern California. While this is a business endeavor for us, we are all from this area. We all have experienced this in one form or fashion. In Richard's case, unfortunately, the loss of 2 homes. In my case, on my night job, evacuating the community twice. So we're well aware of the fact that this is not a situation that the government sector is going to solve on its own, or that the private sector is going to solve on its own. It's got to be a partnership with both. So with that said, I will take any questions you might have. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to open it up first to Chief Duncan, who's had his hand up for a while and obviously has had a lot of interactions with Illumination. So I thought I'd start off with Chief Duncan. If we can get him to unmute.
Oh, muted. There you go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the time. Thank you, Supervisor Sabatier, for that. Question for you: the map seems to end a little bit short of the county line, so we got a lot of counties south of where these maps are cutting off. So, as Richard also lives in that area, that's a concern for me. Additionally, so my question, and what we've been seeing a lot, is power outages, so PSPS events. So I really want to know what our capacity is for battery backup, and inevitably in a red flag event, we're going to get the power shut off. We're going to be operating on battery backup. But what is the time frame for that? And we're seeing that 72 hours is not enough. So I would like to see, we're pushing out maybe a week's worth of backup power, so enough propane to run that generator to power that site for a week. Additionally, though there's a couple of locations up in Cobb that don't have coverage with the sirens that are already there. So I'd really like to see if we can get on the list for a tower up in that area, more towards the top of the town site, and maybe one towards Loch Lomond, where we have some more spots in there that don't have coverage from the current siren system. So not sure how we can get a couple more sites on your radar, but there is a lot of South County beyond that map. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll let Richard address the mapping element. I'll talk briefly about the battery backup and the solar coverage, which are critical. We all know that the PSPS situation is going to be here, and it goes hand in hand with fire season. So on the IQ Firewatch system, for the early detection, that has 24 hours of battery backup, which is generated through solar activity. So, at worst case scenario, there's darkness for 24 straight hours. That system will still work, but the reality is it needs to carry us basically through the evening. The type of solar panel system we're using can work in less than ideal conditions. On the siren side, Richard, I believe the battery backup on that is 8 hours. And those are, again, solar generated, or solar, the batteries are being filled through solar, so that's helpful there. The alarm system, the sirens, once they're off and running and you've chosen as a community to activate them, which is a message to seek further information for your community, there's kind of a rare occasion where you're going to activate them multiple times during an incident, because at that point, when you've exhausted 8 hours worth, you're probably already telling your community that they need to be out of here. The cellular side, right now the Public Utilities Commission requires any newly developed cellular location in fire-prone areas, which clearly we are, has to have a minimum of 72 hours of backup. At this point, that's all the carriers are required to do. I'd love to be in a position where they have to carry a week's worth as well. But at this point, we're even happy that they're being actually ordered to get up to at least 72 hours worth. On that note, Richard, on the mapping, if you we're happy to go beyond this, but this is kind of where we're starting, and a lot of this, remember, is driven by where we feel we can commercialize a cell site to help pay for this as well. But Richard, do you want to talk about expanding the map?
So the map was cut off a little bit, and so for Chief Duncan, this actually starts around the Rancheria area down by Twin Pines, and that would be LC12, then over Hidden Valley area, which would be LC14 on the map, and then we have an IQ site proposed for up on Cobb, and also the stretch between Hidden Valley and Lower Lake, and then up on Cobb as well, around the water tanks by not Harrington Flat, but up by the chopper landing.
Yeah, the Boggs Helitech base.
Exactly. At the water tanks there, we have a site proposed for there as well.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't see it on the map, so thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
And we appreciate all that fire intel that we get from those, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and open it up for the board for any comments or questions. Supervisor Pyska, would you like to start us?
I would. Thank you for the presentation. I think we all recognize this is the kind of technology that we desperately need. And, we're looking at another potentially very dangerous summer. And I think our summers are going to be this way going forward. So couple questions. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. So how are you going to, with these added sites, there's going to be some redundancy and overlap. And I appreciate that, because we do have situations where our towers go down. And so I know Richard has, worked in this profession for a long time. So I appreciate him building in these redundancies. The other issue is testing. Currently, we have siren testing done through the Sheriff's Office, who will be in charge of activating the sirens. And currently we're doing the first Monday of the month testing in Cobb, which is great, because everybody can get a feel for where they are when the siren goes off. And so, we've realized over the course of a year or so that we need to add additional sirens. So if we could have, that's going to be a part of this, is monthly siren testing for everybody in the county. And it's going to get us all in the habit of listening for those sirens, knowing what to do, becoming acclimated to a new form of technology. Unfortunately, Sheriff Martin wasn't able to make it here today, but I have had these discussions with him in the past. So it's going to be really interesting to hear his perspective after he gets to view this presentation later. Just bringing more coverage to the county is so important. I mean, I have been evacuating during times and not had cell coverage. And that is a very dangerous, terrifying situation to be in. This is also an economic issue where we should have full coverage on all of our arterial roads throughout the county. Many of us have, we know when we have to drop a call because I'm going through a section of highway. And not really acceptable in this day and age to have these blackout zones on our highways. I've shared this story before. I was very pregnant one day coming home. I just had my car serviced at the dealership and it broke down and night was falling and I was very, very pregnant and I was stuck on the side of the road, and that was a terrifying situation for me to be in. And again, this day and age, that shouldn't happen. So I appreciate this presentation, and I really hope the rest of the board got a lot out of this. Some of the things to consider, this is going to take if we give the direction today for staff to look into identifying our county sites, it's going to take a significant amount of county hours to do this work. And so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, Chris, how would we cover that?
So the way we've, just real quickly on the siren testing, there are best practices recommended by the manufacturer. We have firsthand experience up here. We chose initially not to follow the best practices, which is once a month for 3 minutes. We chose once a month for 30 seconds, and the public became very upset that they couldn't hear it, et cetera. So now we do the first Wednesday of every month at noon for 3 full minutes, so that everybody can kind of figure that part out. So that's a recommendation we make. On the amount of time offered, we come in, most of the work we can do is desktop exercises from coverage for the IQ system, the Firewatch system, and then also from Siren. And then we'll put people on the ground from the manufacturers we partner with and ourselves. And we'll do most of the legwork before we even come and utilize staff time, just so, we're aware of that. We work with public agencies all the time. Napa County is a great example. We probably put in, 200 hours of work before we even went to the county to say, these are the sites that we would suggest you're looking at, to kind of get that started, and respecting the fact that, we don't want to utilize too much of their time and how that gets covered. They've chosen to cover that as part of their public safety element. Everything else that we can cover, we pay all of our, permit fees, inspection fees. We're paying for the CEQA study that the County of Napa has chosen to do on a public safety system. We could have a debate about that. So we don't ask for any breaks or discounts on encroachment fees, permit fees, et cetera. But there will indeed be some county time that's involved. And where that's mostly come in is getting access to the actual right-of-way maps. There are recommended right-of-way maps we can do desktop, but until the county kind of lets us know on their GIS system that location needs to be moved 50 feet left or right, that can be a challenge. But we do as much heavy lifting as we can before we drop it on someone's desk, because we live that every day.
While this is an evolving step, what we've done for Napa County is we have created PDF files, and there's videos as well of each location, exactly where we're proposing the pole to go, and just pictures from every direction, so that we wouldn't want to waste any staff's time to actually have to go and visit it unless there was an actual need for them to be there. And then everybody can get an idea and an overview of exactly where everything would be, and any overhead potentials, trees in the way, which we do not remove trees, and things of that nature. Underground utilities, is there a gas line that's 50 feet away? We just mark everything.
I'd like to interrupt the conversation real quick. As this is a private company, I'm feeling some little discomfort of speaking about specifics of any projects versus maybe some questions about their product that they're offering to provide. And I'd like to go to Ms. Grant to kind of help us make sure that we're staying within our lines and the confines of the agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I understand your concern, and certainly it's clear that Illumination Technologies is simply trying to inform your board, but there is a line in terms of between presentation and job interview, and that's really where it has to stay. So again, as long as you're speaking in general remarks and the type of work that needs to be done, you're all right, but specifics for Lake County at this point would require a different agenda item.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Any other supervisor or Supervisor Pyska, if you still had some open questions left over?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Scott, I saw your hand.
Just wanted to say I appreciate this this discussion. I know that public safety is definitely key. I know for myself, I've been at the shelters during evacuation waiting for updates from our sheriff and unable to get those updates because he is not in an area where he can communicate. I love the idea that we're connecting this with a public safety element because we struggle here in Lake County when we do want to put up a cell tower to have that communication. There's a lot of pushback. So it's really a mixed bag, a 50-50 of people not wanting to see more towers go up, and then those who know that public safety and having that communication is key. So I think this is going to be an easier conversation when we connect it to public safety. So I just really appreciate that. And I think we need to be looking forward to something to bring this into our community, if it's this company or another company, but we definitely need to be looking at this. And I know Supervisor Sabatier has been working hard on this subject, bringing in communication to our community so everybody will have equal access. So thank you.
Supervisor Scott, there isn't a community we've been to where this debate doesn't happen. Cell towers, fortunately or unfortunately, they're a necessary evil for communication. The difference we're making is taking that necessary evil of the structure and giving it a public safety benefit as well. But
thank you very much. Any other comment or questions from supervisors? Supervisor Crandall?
Yeah, just I appreciate this as well. This is a synergistic type of approach to numerous different issues that we can solve. And was it ever just a question? Did anyone ever look into possibly the area where Lake Pillsbury is for a tower or something like that? I know there's a small area out there, but it is an entry point for fire possibilities. Just a thought.
Richard?
Yes, absolutely. We've looked at IQ Firewatch for out there, and then in some cases, we do just simply a siren. If there's no feasible way to do a cell location there, it has been done in the past. So that's definitely an area that I've looked at. Blue Lakes as well. We looked at the Blue Lakes Fire Department. I know there's a Verizon site up on the top of the hill there, and then beyond that towards the where you cut off to Potter Valley, there's a U.S. cell site that's up there as well. But definitely, I've worked for U.S. Cellular, I've worked for Verizon, I've worked for Sprint, I've worked for AT&T, almost exclusively throughout Lake County, but all the way up to Del Norte as well. So I'm very familiar with all the counties around here and all of the cell sites.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
I'd just like to thank you for the presentation today. Obviously, public safety is one of the things here in Lake County that we pride ourselves on, always looking to try and bring in the most current technology. So appreciate the presentation today, and would just like to hear from our constituents here today to hear the response from our community.
All right, thank you. I've had a presentation personally with Illumination. I do think that their technology has some benefits. I know that I was slightly concerned about the question about the error rate, and based on what they told me, the artificial intelligence learns as they go to better understand what it's looking at. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you said or the first year the error rate can be expected at about 80%, and then and that Illumination themselves is in charge for the first year of looking at the early detection to help train the artificial intelligence in better understanding what it's looking at in communities that it's installed in. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, so the first year of operation, while the system's learning your particular geography, there is a pretty high error rate. It's not quite 80%, but we do, that's what we recommend at the very least the first year, which we fund, is that it goes through the third-party monitoring center. It's not ours. We hand that over to experts. So this is what they do 24/7, and that's the center that would be in Arizona. And because it's all driven through technology, it's a split second between the detection to the monitoring center. So yeah, strong recommendation that you go to a monitoring element, and that's where everyone we've spoken to and working with, County of Napa as an example, monitoring center before it gets to their fire services.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. And I appreciate the fact that you're already working with our fire districts to look at getting some of these installed. I think that's the right place to get started. I think that overall, any early detection, whether it's calling law enforcement or calling firefighters, as soon as we can get to the scene of what is happening, the easier it is to resolve the issue at hand. So I think that early detection is always good. However, it doesn't stop or prohibit the other conversation, which is how do we prohibit these fires from starting in the first place? And so I think fire suppression still remains, for me, the priority. After that is the early detection, because if we have the messiest of wildlands out there possible, early detection could only help us so much. We need to make sure that our geography and our properties are well maintained to protect ourselves.
Yeah, this is definitely not a silver bullet. It's part of a much broader series of activities that have to occur.
Right. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you, Supervisor Pyska, for bringing this to our attention. I think that the conversation, if you have not, I'm not sure if Illumination has had the conversation with our law enforcement or sheriff, just to check in on maybe what their needs might be, because that would be an interesting conversation to see how they can find benefits from this, as well as our fire districts. But other than that, let's go ahead and, Jake, let's open it up to the Zoom room for the public to ask any questions or make any comments that they may have.
All right, I've sent an unmute request out to the Zoom room floor. If you'd like to make a comment, please unmute and state your first and last name.
Hi, my name is Bart Levinson. Thank you very much for this presentation. I just want to make sure that I understood the gentleman doing the presentation correctly, that your company is only offering 24 hours of solar battery backup. Did I hear that correctly?
So on the IQ Firewatch, the early detection, there's a battery that is 24 hours of backup, but after you get through the night cycle, when you're back into the day, the solar will then kick in and regenerate that battery and operate the system. So unless we have a period of 24 hours of total darkness, it's proven to be very efficient and sufficient. And again, this is a very similar system they're using in 11 other countries.
And in case of wildfire where there is very thick smoke, do you know how long your solar backup would work?
As long as there's some sunlight getting through, even in small quantities, it's enough to keep it going, and it takes a very small draw on the electricity. We did look at going to a 72-hour battery concept, and from the manufacturer and other areas that use it, it's far too much. It's basically overkill on that. But it's the whole concept is that it's going to regenerate itself even during less than ideal conditions.
I'd like to echo what Paul Duncan said and Jessica Pyska, that our particular area has to have more like between 72 hours and a week backup coverage. It's all of our worst nightmare to have been evacuated without cell coverage, and it's very possible with the existing situation and with the service that you're offering.
We agree with the coverage, or at least the battery length or power lengths to the carriers is driven by the California Public Utilities Commission, and as of July of last year is the first time they've ordered them to have a minimum of 72 hours. That's not something we can drive, unfortunately. That's the carriers who put that there. Our batteries are related to the detection. Yep. Well, I agree with you very much so.
I understand that, but we risk even losing 911, and also that coverage isn't required by the PUC until 2022. So what we will need from your company is something that meets the needs of our county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jake, let's go ahead and see if we have another public comment.
All right. Well, I will. I sent an additional unmute request out to the Zoom room floor. If you'd like to make a comment, please unmute and state your first and last name.
Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and bring it back to the board. Supervisor Pyska, in part B of your agenda item, you were requesting potential direction. Do you have a suggestion of what the direction might look like? Just looking to see what your thoughts were.
My suggestion is that we start looking at the county sites that we could add to the system that the fire chiefs are looking at with the fire stations. And Chris, how far along are you with those fire stations? Are you in contract yet?
We have verbal agreements. We have to get a contract back to them. And part of the challenge, again, is encouraging those carriers that, okay, we're ready to go. It's, sometimes with them, it's the chicken or the egg. Build it, then we'll put our stuff on there. The revenues from that relationship is what drives this, so we're still pushing on that. But we are in agreement formation that we need to get to your fire chiefs.
Okay. Well, I would like to see our county move in that direction to see what sites that we own could be part of the network. I know that as Supervisor Sabatier brought up, we have a lot of wildlands that need to be managed, and that's something that I work on really hard every day. But that is truly a years-long process. It's going to be something that never ends, and so it's really something we can't wait for. So I would just really like to move forward with having discussions with Illuminations coming into our county.
So just to clarify, ask staff to review the technology, the product being offered, and how to possibly benefit from that technology, and then come back with an agenda item on either looking to do an RFP or looking to do something along those lines. That way we can go ahead and make decision then.
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Do we have agreements from the board that this is something we want to see them looking at?
Yes.
Okay. Looks like there's consensus for that. Did you have a particular staff that you were thinking of, a specific department?
Well, I know it is difficult for community development right now. I'm guessing that would be the area, or we could get input from Lars, Director Ewing. I'm not sure.
I'm thinking maybe OES, asking them to review this.
Okay.
Since that would be who is in charge eventually of reviewing the cameras and all the early detection. I think having their feedback on their thoughts on this and then how they feel they can benefit from it might be a good way. Okay. I see that Ms. Hutchinson popped on. I was hoping to get her comment.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we might convene representatives from a few departments to look at this. The Public Services Department is the one that would be able to speak to existing sites, and certainly OES would speak to the points that we just raised. Our office can convene a team of staff to look at this.
Supervisor Simon, you were starting to say something.
Yeah, and just other companies and opportunities that may be out there. Ultimately, this is, from my understanding and in the presentation, and I have had conversations with Richard in the past, about this potential project, but this is a right-of-way, right? These things will be going in the right-of-way, so that obviously would include public works, so yeah, agree with looking at the opportunities that may be coming down the pipe, but I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for clearing that would be eventually trying to build to an RFP that will go out to other companies too. So appreciate the presentation today, and thank you for bringing this forward, Jessica.
And I have a question to both Supervisor Steinman and Supervisor Pyska. You're both on the Risk Reduction Authority. Is this something that the Risk Reduction Authority can try to tackle, or is that something to continue as was just described and bring it to the department heads and then come back?
Well, my thoughts is obviously, the ones doing the heavy lifting will be our department heads. So looking at this opportunity through there, so I feel obviously staying in touch with the program, because Jessica, as a connection with this business opportunity or thing that may be coming down the pipe. So, obviously we'll stay involved, but our department heads are the best ones to give recommendations.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay, and I see at least 3 nods, if not more, and so staff has direction. Perfect. Thank you very much, both Richard and Chris, for your presentation, and maybe we'll be hearing from you guys again in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, it is 11:04. Let's go ahead and take a break. We are a little bit behind schedule. We will resume at 11:15 a.m., where we will hear our 10:15 item for the Groundwater Basin Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So we'll be back at 11:15.
Thank you.
Okay, checking in. We got 11:15 a.m. And we will be reconvening our meeting and continuing on with item 6.4, our 10:15 a.m. item, consideration of presentation of Big Valley Groundwater Basin Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA, and implementation. Director De Leon.
Thank you. Good morning. Scott De Leon, Water Resources Director. This morning, I'd like to introduce Marina Delajanis, who is the Deputy Director of Water Resources. She's been handling the development of the Big Valley GSA, and she's going to be making today's presentation. So I will turn it over to Marina. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Scott De Leon, for providing that introduction, and thank you to the Board of Supervisors for allowing me to discuss all things Big Valley and groundwater today. So I'm going to be sharing my screen, and please let me know if you're able to see. Are we good?
We are great.
Awesome, yay, all right. So good morning, everyone. As Director Scott De Leon said, my name is Marina Delajanis, and I serve as the Deputy Water Resources Director for the Lake County Watershed Protection District. So today I will be providing an update on our Big Valley Groundwater Basin and our Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, also referred to as SGMA, implementation. So just a very quick overview of what I will be touching base on today. So I will be going and I will be providing an update, as I refer to it as a 101 on what groundwater is and SGMA. I will also be diving deep into our Big Valley Groundwater Basin and then highlighting the implementation that we've done so far for SGMA, specifically highlighting our state support, stakeholder outreach, and next steps. And then I will also be introducing, we will be having 2 additional public meetings taking place later this week that I will be providing the login information for. And then, of course, providing my contact information. So if anyone has any questions following up, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions. So starting out, I would just like to say Happy Groundwater Awareness Week. This is an exciting week and one of my favorite weeks. So as a refresher, groundwater is a vital source of water that is stored in the earth beneath our feet. So where this water is stored, as you can see in these graphics, are often referred to as aquifers. And aquifers are the space between the sand, soils, and fractured rock where our groundwater is stored. So these layers of our aquifers make up a groundwater basin. So again, we'll be touching base on our Big Valley Groundwater Basin. So groundwater is a part of our natural water cycle, and this is by means of precipitation that lands on the ground surface, infiltrates into the subsurface, and that precipitation, the rain that falls from our subsurface and continues downward through the soil, it reaches the aquifer, recharging our groundwater basin. So in honor of Groundwater Awareness Week, I would like to share some of my favorite groundwater facts, and that is during an average year in California, out of the 515 identified groundwater basins, approximately 38% of groundwater provides our state supply, and then during a dry year, groundwater contributes up to 46% or more of our state's annual water supply. So touching base on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, again, that is referred to as SGMA. It is comprised of 3 different bills. I will not be diving deep into the specifics of the bill, but again, if anyone has any questions following, I'd be more than happy to dive deep into those. So the bills that make up SGMA are AB 1739, SB 1168, and SB 1319. So SGMA was signed into law, in September of 2014 by Governor Edmund G. Brown and became effective in 2015. So these 3 bill packages that make up SGMA, the whole focus of SGMA is to ensure local control and sustainability. So SGMA does understand, and the legislation does understand, that groundwater is best managed at the local level. So it requires local agencies called Groundwater Sustainability Agencies, or GSAs as the acronym, to develop and implement the plans to achieve sustainability in their basin. So to support that local management, the legislative identifies role for various state agencies. And we can see that with this graph that I have right here. We have DWR at the top, and they serve as the regulating and assisting agency. So DWR is the California Department of Water Resources. In the bottom left, we have the State Water Resources Control Board. They serve as the assistance, oversight, and enforcing agency. And in the bottom right, we have the GSA, which is us at the local level, and they serve as the planning and implementation agency. So again, to ensure that local control and that knowledge, during the entire process, we utilize our support and our knowledge from our stakeholders during this entire process. Now, one thing that I would like to point out with this graphic is you can see that it does seem that there is some sort of hierarchy. I don't want that to get the picture across that, you know, DWR is in charge, State Water Resource Control Board, and GSA. The whole focus of SIGMA is to ensure that local sustainability. So I do like how this graphic does outline that stakeholders are involved from the very beginning. So what is sustainability? Again, this is another aspect of SIGMA. So the legislation defines sustainability groundwater management as managing the basin so the 6 undesirable results are avoided or eliminated. So these 6 undesirable results are referred to as the lowering groundwater levels, reduction of storage, seawater intrusion, which we do not have to worry about in our Big Valley Basin or any of our groundwater basins since we are not a coastal community, degraded quality, land subsidence, and surface water depletion. So for our Big Valley Groundwater Basin, as we are developing our GSP, we will be focusing on these 6 undesirable results, outlining these undesirable results and seeing which ones, if any, have an effect on our groundwater basins and how we can best maintain and manage this basin in a sustainable manner. So looking into our wonderful Big Valley Groundwater Basin, it is identified under California Department of Water Resources Bulletin 118 as a medium priority basin. So Bulletin 118 is an inventory assessment provided by the state that identifies the occurrence and nature of a basin's hydrology to best identify groundwater management and recommendations for the future. So as you can see on this graphic on the left, there are over 500 groundwater basins identified under SIGMA, and with Bulletin 118, the state does an assessment on each individual basin as they are all unique, again, going back to ensuring local control and management of our basins, since we know our basins best, to do the prioritization, and we will prioritize Big Valley under medium priority basins. So since we are prioritized as a medium priority basin, we do have to develop a groundwater sustainability plan, or the acronym is GSP. We love acronyms in the California water world, by January 31st of 2022. So a little bit more on our Big Valley Groundwater Basin. It does lie south of Clear Lake and includes Kelsey Creek and Adobe Creek, which both drain into Clear Lake. It is a source of water for the community of Kelseyville and Big Valley Rancheria. It is a very large agricultural area for the community, and it is 6 miles wide and 8 miles long. So again, although SIGMA does focus on local control, I would like to highlight that the state and the support that they have been able to provide us thus far in terms of our Big Valley and SIGMA implementation. So highlighting a little bit of the state support that we've been able to receive so far. One being is our Proposition 68 Sustainable Groundwater Management Grant that we were awarded in 2020. That was March. We applied in 2019 and we were awarded that with a $0 cost share. We're also awarded facilitation support services through California Department of Water Resources, where we have been working closely with Stantec Consulting Services, and I will be touching base on the work that they've been able to provide here in a little bit. And we were also awarded an extension for our facilitation support services in December of 2020. We have also received a letter of support from the State Water Resources Board to the County of Lakes Board of Supervisors in December of 2019, commending the Water Resource Department's efforts and our SIGMA implementation. All right, so let's touch base a little bit about one of our biggest focuses that we have been doing so far in terms of our groundwater sustainability plan development for our Big Valley Basin, and that is our stakeholder outreach. So again, the state, or the Department of Water Resources, us here at Lake County, were awarded facilitation support services through the state, working with Stantec Consulting Services to aid in stakeholder engagement and outreach, a plan that we will be utilizing in our groundwater sustainability plan. So over the last few months, Stantec has been working closely with some of our stakeholders that I have listed out here to provide these stakeholder interviews and assessments so we can better understand our basin and understand that local knowledge that we have. So some of the stakeholders that they have been able to have conversations with are the Lake County Farm Bureau, Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians, Tri-Council for the Clear Lake Hitch, Lake County Special Districts, Kelseyville Unified School District, and private well owners. So again, the goal of these stakeholder assessments is to leverage the knowledge, ensure that we have active and effective stakeholder engagement and communication throughout the entire process of our GSP development. So just highlighting a little bit of what we've been able to receive from these stakeholder assessments. So again, we've had 2 non-governmental organizations, 1 municipal and water supply entity, 1 industrial water supply user, 2 agricultural water supply users, and 1 interested party that were interviewed and had conversations with Stantec. We also had 2 additional assessments coming from the Lake County Special Districts and Lake County Farm Bureau. And something that I would like to highlight and that I find very interesting during these assessments is that there's 37 years of average time living in the basin. So that basically means that we have 37 years of that internal knowledge, understanding, and dedication from our stakeholders, which definitely will highlight and help us as we develop our GSP. Because again, we want to develop these GSPs to ensure local control and local management and sustainable management of our groundwater basin. So again, going into these stakeholder assessments, I have some screenshots of 3 pages of the many pages that the stakeholder assessments were comprised of by Stantec. So again, Stantec is our consulting services that we work with through our facilitation support services awarded by the California Department of Water Resources. So Stantec did hold individual assessments with identified Big Valley Basin stakeholders with the goal of gaining an understanding of expectations and potential barriers to our GSP development that we are in the process of. So this information from Stantec was compiled and summarized by Stantec and will be presented to Big Valley GSA meetings that we'll be having in the near future. And the responses were also collected by an outside entity to ensure that the responses collected and provided would not be attributed to a specific stakeholder, interest party, or individual. So again, with the next steps, so we compiled these stakeholder assessments and we will be utilizing these stakeholder assessments to identify the advisory committee that will be working closely with our Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, guide our communication and engagement plan that we will be incorporating in our Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan development, and issue an identification and message development. So again, just focusing on some of the assessment results that we've had. So we were able to get some feedback from Stantec by means of having these conversations with our stakeholders. So we were able to gauge an interest and anticipation for engagement, especially with COVID. It makes it difficult because ideally these meetings would be held in person, but we have to transition to a virtual platform. Also with outreach, so how do we not only communicate with our stakeholders, but also the greater community at large? How can we make sure that this information is shared and that we're able to have this effective communication with not only our stakeholders, but our community? And most importantly, how we at Lake County Water Resources can provide that education and outreach in terms of SGMA, what our role is with the department, what the role of the state is, the GSA, et cetera, in terms of groundwater management and sustainable groundwater management. All right, so next steps. So we were awarded our extension of our facilitation support services on December 9th of 2020. We released our request for proposals for our GSP development in January 14th of 21. Our goal is to select and award our consultant by March 16th of 21, so this month coming here shortly. From now on, moving until our January 31st, 2022 deadline, we'll be having our Big Valley GSA advisory meetings and public meetings. Again, these meetings will be held publicly and we will do proper notification and ensure that we have that engagement and communication with not only our stakeholders, but also the public. From now on until January 31st, 2022, we will be developing our groundwater sustainability plan. Long-term goal is to apply for DWR's Prop 68 implementation grant, which will piggyback off of our Prop 68 Sustainable Groundwater Management Planning Grant that we were awarded for our GSP development. With the long-term goal on the very right-hand side of this graphic, again, achieving sustainability, which is the goal of SGMA by 2042. So we get, again, in honor of Groundwater Awareness Week, we do have 2 more public meetings taking place this week. I have the Zoom information provided, but the agenda can also be found on the bulletin board on the first floor of the courthouse and on our Water Resources website. So this is just a Big Valley Basin public meeting. It'll be piggybacking off this presentation, but in a much more in-depth detail. So we'll be highlighting the hydrology of our basin, our next steps, diving deeper into our stakeholder engagement, and ensuring that all folks who are interested in our GSP development are able to be at the table. So our first meeting is taking place tomorrow, Wednesday, March 10th, 12 to 1 p.m. PST via Zoom. And then it's going to be the same meeting, just a different time via Zoom, Thursday, March 11th, 6 to 7 p.m. So again, these are the same meetings, same information. Both will be recorded, and we will be taking minutes that will be also shared to the public if you aren't able to attend these, that we will be posting on our website in an accessible location. So on that note, I have my contact information here. I also have information that you can find from the State Water Resources Control Board and the California Department of Water Resources, along with our Lake County Water Resources Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency website that we have going on. I have my contact information here. If anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to take those now or at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Director Delagianis, for your report. Appreciate that this is moving along, especially during our COVID times, as I know that is kind of difficult, especially when you're looking for public input. Let's open it up for the board for any questions or comments. Supervisor Pyska.
Thank you for this presentation. I'm so happy to see that everything's moving along. Who has been selected to be on the GSA?
So that is a great question, Supervisor Pyska. So the GSA serves as the Board of Directors of the Watershed Protection District. So they also are the Board of Directors, Board of Supervisors of the County of Lake. So we have the GSA serving as the Board of Directors of the Watershed Protection District. So that is made up of Supervisor Simon, Supervisor Sabatier, Supervisor Pyska, Supervisor Crandall, and Supervisor Scott. And then they will be working closely with our GSA Advisory Committee and our stakeholders.
And who is on the advisory committee?
So that will be a board elected committee. So it'll be up to the GSA. Again, that will follow closely with our stakeholders that we've been having these conversations with. So SIGMA does outline the beneficial uses and users that do need to have a seat. So again, SIGMA provides that framework, but looking at the specific individuals that will be sitting on that advisory committee, that will be us at the local level to decide.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Supervisor Scott.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for your presentation and your passion for groundwater. I know I've said that before, but it definitely comes through that this is something that is, exciting to you, and you're getting people excited about groundwater. And that's, for me, that's a hard thing to do, but you definitely keep us engaged. So I just really appreciate that.
Thank you, Supervisor Scott. I appreciate that.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. I had a similar question as Supervisor Pyska, and I know that you're on your way to getting that advisory committee put together. I don't know, I believe that everybody received the invitation for the upcoming public hearings or public meetings to discuss this in further greater detail. Just kind of wanted to check in with Ms. Grant. I had it on my calendar. I don't know how many other supervisors were planning on being there. If there's more than 2 of us in there, should we step out, or should we just not say a word and just only in listening mode? Just to kind of check in so we don't mess up the process in any way.
Mr. Chair, you are entitled to attend educational, informational seminars. However, you do have to be careful, because you can't nod or applaud or ask questions that indicate your position, because remember, the Brown Act precludes you from reaching consensus, and that can be done through body language as well as through formal action. So I'd leave that up to you, but again, would ask that everyone exercise caution not to inadvertently look at each other and nod as if that's a good idea, because that would be a problem.
So basically keep your video off and keep your mic off.
Just listen, if I would not suggest that of any of you, but since you did, that's an excellent idea, sir.
All right. No, I thank you very much. I believe that this is not one that we were fighting to change the not the allocation, but the state had stated, I believe, Upper Lake and Big Valley Basin needed to be qualified as medium. Was it the Upper Lake one that we were looking to change, or was it the Big Valley one?
So it was the Upper Lake one, and we did get that changed. So that was also medium priority basin, and then the state did their reprioritization off of Bulletin 118, and we were able to alter, or I guess better provide them information, and that was help with some of our stakeholders, especially Brenna Sullivan with the Lake County Farm Bureau. So yeah, and to answer your question, Chair Sabatier, we are not working on changing this. We already have this deadline ahead of us. It's a very quickly approaching deadline that we have ahead of us. So it's a medium priority basin, and we're planning on keeping it that way. So
perfect. And then I take it, since things need to be not finalized, but at least what is the program for sustainability by 2022, with the idea that by 2040/42 that we've reached that sustainability, that there will be a lot of action in between to try to get that date to be met as early as possible, or at the very least not to create a larger problem.
correct, yes. So when we develop our groundwater sustainability plan, it will outline the actions that we will be promising to ensure that sustainability. So this entire time until January 31st, we will be coordinating closely with our stakeholders. Hence the reason we're bringing a consultant on board to help us get that information and that GSP met following SGMA guidelines to ensure that we reach sustainability by January 31st, 2022. Another reason why we're hoping to apply for those implementation grants. So anything that we outline in our GSP, we hopefully have funds to ensure that we can actually do the work that we promise to do to meet that sustainability.
All right. And then my last question is, it's set up as a medium priority by the state, mainly due to the amount of agriculture in the area that are drawing from the water table, or is it that there's evidence that there's already some data to say there might be some issues with sustainability?
So the prioritization is based off of multiple different components of this assessment, and that can be found via Bulletin 118. Again, this is something that we're going to be diving deeper into in our next public meetings. We'll get into the specifics of the hydrology and the technical background of our basin, and also the prioritization, why we were prioritized that way. So the ag does have one aspect to it. Again, it is a very ag heavy basin, but that's not the only reason to it as to it was priority. So going off to the priority points, we do, the state does outline very clearly how we got those points and why we got those points. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead, and I see a hand up. If there's no further comment from the board, let's go ahead and open it up to the public. Jake, I see that Betsy Kahn has her hand up. Let's start with her.
Good morning, Bruno, and the rest of you guys. I would like to just contribute 2 points of fact to help you understand the history of this. First, the United States Department of Agriculture designated the Big Valley, aka Kelseyville groundwater basin, as impaired back in the early 1950s. So it's always had some really, iffy constraints on the use of the water. Secondly, when you were discussing the other groundwater basin that was considered by the state of California as impaired, that was not Upper Lake, it was Scotts Valley. But through the actions taken by the Department of Water Resources at the time, the state reconsidered that after they studied the reports from Department of Water Resources that showed that it is meeting its sustainability requirements of not being overtapped in any given year. So it was not Upper Lake, though. Our groundwater basin is in no way even close to impaired. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jake, let's make sure the rest of the room has the ability to unmute and ask any questions or make any comments.
All right.
Mr. Chair, can we take down the presentation, please?
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much.
All right, so I have a unmute request out on the Zoom room floor. If you'd like to make a comment, please unmute and state your first and last name.
Okay, let's bring it back to the board. No further public comment. Any further comments on this before we move on?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a comment. Thank you for the presentation and moving this project forward. I know, and I did want to thank, not only Water Resources, but also I know Brenda Sullivan was in that conversation with Farm Bureau, and we were talking about state control, and now working towards local control is always our goal. So thank you very much and appreciate the presentation.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Deputy Director, for your time and your presentation. And we will, some of us or all of us will see you sometime later this week in your meetings.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
And let's move on to item 6.5 or 10:45 a.m. item, consideration of report from the Clear Lake Environmental Research Center clerk, Supervisor Pyska.
So I wanted to share with all of you the work that clerk has been doing in partnership with the risk reduction over, let's see, I think it's been about a year and a half now. There's a lot of work going on in our county. Clerk has been able to bring many millions of dollars in for fire mitigation. And I get asked a lot, what is our county doing to prepare for fire season and to work on our vegetation management, which is a massive issue. And clerk has been doing a great deal of work. So I just wanted to let you know what's been happening, what's on the horizon, what are the possibilities, and that there are resources available throughout the county. So I hope you enjoy the presentation. And Will, I appreciate you coming for another week. And we had to push you last week because it went a little long. So I really thank you for your patience on that.
No problem. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having us. And I'm excited about the opportunity to fill everybody in about what Clerk's been up to over the last couple of years here. Let's see, I do have a presentation to share. Hopefully everybody can see that okay.
Perfect.
All right, joining me today is Laurel Bard, our Civic Spark Fellow. She's been working with us to help prioritize some future projects and help us implement the funding we have. And before we get too far in it, I'm Will Evans, the Executive Director of Clear Lake Environmental Research Center. CLERC is what we call it. CLERC is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that our goals are trying to collaborate with all the different interests in Lake County, interested in the environment and solving issues around Clear Lake. We're also interested in studying Clear Lake and the surrounding areas and implementing projects and programs that help address the issues and problems with our environment and our economy, both locally and worldwide. So currently our big programs, we have our Clerk Lab and the Fire and Forestry program. The lab, it's an analytical lab that works for water utilities, helps them maintain regulatory compliance, and is currently the only accredited lab in the county, helping to keep those lab fees from leaving the county. And then the Fire and Forestry program, as Supervisor Pyska mentioned, we have been fairly successful in getting grants the last couple of years. So today I'm going to focus mainly on the Fire and Forestry program, and I'd love to come back at a future date and fill you in more on the lab because that's been an interesting project as well. But so today, and it has last week's date, but same presentation, same information. We're going to go over the CAL FIRE grants. We worked to get a forest health grant and a fire prevention grant. Then Laurel's going to fill us in about the regional prioritization planning item. And then I'll wrap things up with some future projects and funding on the horizon, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So the Fire and Forestry program, this kind of got started, well, here in Lake County, we have a problem with fires. Everybody knows that's kind of a complicated issue, and I won't go into why it's a problem, but I will focus on what we're doing about it. So starting in end of 2017, beginning of 2018, one of the clerk board members, Carolyn Rattan, she was asked by Harbin Hot Springs to help restore their watershed. And Carolyn, being with the background she had, she starts looking at grants that could help address this. So she worked with Harbin Hot Springs to write a forest health grant proposal that was funded at the beginning of 2018. it was about $400,000, covered about 500 acres of work for cleaning up damaged forests in the fire, and then also doing reforestation in areas, and then a little bit of prescribed fire in a few places that warranted it. But that was the first forest health grant ever awarded in Lake County. And afterwards, Harbin started talking to a lot of their neighbors and other retreat centers. And then starting in June of 2019, we started getting several requests for assistance with grants. And also around that time, I went to a screening of Wilder Than Wild at the Soper Reese Theater. And this was kind of a community organizing effort, trying to bring all the people involved in fire resilience together in one place to get to know each other. I think this is actually where I met Supervisor Peiska. So it sort of hit me then that this was a big thing, and I think, you know, Clerk could do something to help address this for the community. So we started kicking around this idea of, rather than, you know, submitting several grant applications from multiple landowners in the county, what if we all work together and turn in one big proposal, and then, you know, it's everyone's applying together, we're all working together, and rather than having everybody compete against each other, we actually end up helping each other out. So we had this idea, and then in July, we had a meeting with CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Mike Wink, and he sort of, we pitched this idea to him, and his eyes sort of lit up. This is a great idea. So at that point, you know, we kind of hit the ground running, and I had a meeting with another nonprofit called the Watershed Research and Training Center. They're based up in Trinity County, and this was kind of a coincidence that I had already done a little bit of research about them, because they're a nonprofit similar to Clerk. They've been around for 25 years, and I was kind of look at, you know, where they are and then where I want our organization to be. So I set up a meeting with their executive director just to kind of talk shop and compare notes. And coincidentally, the Watershed Center had just received a giant block grant from the state to help build capacity in communities that were, you know, struggling with fire resilience and trying to organize everything. So kind of the series of events of we're getting asked for help, we kind of realized the scope of the problem, and then we started getting some support. We got a small amount of funding, about $10,000, to organize an effort to do these big grants, which was kind of the big thing. When we met with the Watershed Center, they realized the potential we had with our organization, and we just needed to get more funding into people on the ground. So once we kind of had those pieces lined up, we hit the ground running, trying to get as many projects and people involved as possible. I, you know, have a pretty good record of working on competitive grants in Lake County, and a lot of times we struggle to be competitive. So for various factors that a lot of times are out of our control. So I tried to make the proposal as competitive as possible. And one of the, well, several things we did for that. One is asking for all of the treatment types. So this is another benefit of having everybody working together is, you know, somebody that wants to replant trees, you can lump that in with somebody that wants to do fuel reduction, and then they both get credit for both of them in their applications. So we included all the treatment types. We wanted to have a mix of all different types of partners. So, you know, federal, state, local, government, non-government, organizations like the retreat centers, and all the way down to individual landowners, trying to build as big a, you know, coalition, which again, I've realized it's harder to say no to a big group of people than it is just one entity that applies on their own. So our goal, you know, trying to spread funding around geographically and submit that single proposal for Lake County, but trying to keep the project size manageable. And the benefits, you know, achieves the landscape scale project, which one thing is a lot of talk in the industry of fire resilience of, you know, increasing pace and scale. And a big hindrance to that is the way that we've split up ownerships of all our land. It's, you know, everyone has private property rights, and if you cross a property line, then that's a new owner you have to coordinate with and see what their desires are for their land. So by having a big grant, everybody's sort of forced to work together and get along and get what they want out of it. So from CAL FIRE's perspective, this is very streamlined because they have, you know, one grant agreement that they can sent to an entity that they have been working well with, and they know they won't have issues with maintaining compliance with grant requirements and that sort of thing. It also expands access to funding to more landowners, because a lot of people wouldn't even think about going after a forest health grant on their own. You know, they may not even get that far through reading what the application requires. So that's one thing I think is a really good benefit of doing it this way. And we can also package shovel-ready projects with projects that are not quite shovel-ready. And again, that's sort of a way to lift them all up to the level of funding. So throughout this process, we kept everything pretty low-key in terms of public outreach. We relied largely on our grassroots network of people that we already knew. And it did, you know, I say it spread like wildfire, like a lot of things, but it was sort of, you know, neighbors and people would ask us, you know, can you come to my land? And we always tried to strive to get them to get 3 or 4 people together before we could actually start structuring a project, so that, you know, we weren't working with too many, you know, individual landowners. And then the other thing, we didn't really use an evidence-driven prioritization process. This was very much just picking the low-hanging fruit projects that you ask around and everybody says, oh yeah, we need this fuel break done, or we need this area treated. And I was kind of surprised at how consistent everybody's anecdotal recommendations were, which in a lot of ways, maybe that is a good system. But in the future, we want to try to continue to do this and try to have more public involvement, more engagement from people, and also try to use a more data-driven approach to it. So that process, which we started in July 2019, and then we worked all the way up until the grants were due in beginning of December 2019. And that resulted in 2 large proposals. One's the Lake County Hazardous Fuel Reduction Project Phase 1, which is our fire prevention grant. This was valued at $3 million and was awarded in March 2020. So it was just about a year ago. And I got the letter that we were getting funding the same day that I found out they were canceling all professional sports because of the pandemic. So, you know, the celebration was a little muted at the time, but, you know, it's just beginning of a lot of good things. So another reason I'm glad to be here today updating everybody. So included in this fire prevention grant is fuel reduction around the Mount Konocti interface and the Black Forest. Mendocino National Forest has 504 acres of hazard tree removal. We're doing 2 fuel breaks, one in Scotts Valley outside the city of Lakeport, and then another one kind of south of the landfill outside the city of Clear Lake. We're doing some fuel reduction up on Siegler Mountain at the communications site up there. We have funding to do lot clearing on 200 priority lots in residential subdivisions. We're also supporting the South Lake Fire Safe Council chipping program, funding the Tribal Ecological Restoration Alliance workforce development program. We'll be bringing a prescribed fire training exchange event to Lake County in 2022. And then we're working on regional prioritization planning, which is basically trying to streamline this process so that we can do it again and not have to spend as much time or money on it. Then this other proposal is the Forest Health Grant proposal, which this one is a $5 million ask. And we were in conversations with CAL FIRE to have this project funded in March of last year. And due to the pandemic's impact on the budget, CAL FIRE was unable to do any grants for 2020. And, you know, that was disappointing, but understandable given everything else going on. But I'm happy to report that I had a call with CAL FIRE yesterday, the Forest Health staff, and we're back on. So we're having the conversations that we should have had a year ago, but they're looking at funding this proposal hopefully before the beginning of the fiscal year, which is July 1st. But all this depends on the legislature actually taking action on the budget before July 1st, which people that follow that know that it's possible. They've done several early action things this year related to the pandemic. They may be doing this or they may not. So it's still just kind of play by ear. But we're still banking on this funding coming in later this year. So included in this, and I'll go real quick, 700 acres of fuel reduction up on Cobb Mountain, 526 acres of fuel reduction in the National Forest above the hills in Lucerne, 154 acres of reforestation in areas impacted by the Valley Fire and the River Fire, a bioenergy project investment, basically duplicating the equipment that is proposed to be built at Red Hills at another location on the North Shore, trying to cut down on the travel time to deliver the biomass to the site. This Forest Health Grant also includes money for prioritization planning to help streamline things in the future. There's two research components to this. One is through UC Davis to do a revegetation study and climate adaptation model for the National Forest. And this is kind of acknowledging that some of the forest is not going to grow back the way it was before, and we need to anticipate the change so that we're not trying to force Mother Nature into a box. Then the Climate Action Reserve is another nonprofit. They're down in LA, and they do a lot of carbon market tracking. So they're interested in trying to establish a value for biochar so that people can get credit for sequestering that carbon when they make biochar. And that's a topic you could do a whole webinar about biochar if you're interested. So with this, I'm going to take a short break from the PowerPoint, and we're going to move over to the clerk website for a second. And this is a web map if anyone's interested in looking at all of those, the project areas, because I did kind of run through them real quick. Go to the clerk website and just scroll down. There's a link, there's maps and data, fire and forestry projects. And that'll take you to this web map, which shows where all this work is. And I'm going to just spend a few minutes going through a few areas in detail. And I encourage anyone who's interested in learning more about specific work proposed in their part of the county, pull up the map and find out the exact locations. And then you can email me if you have any other questions from that. But so starting out, well, first off, this map has both of the grants on it. So the yellow areas are the fire prevention grant, which was funded last year. And then the orange, yellow, and red, or the orange, green, and red is for the Forest Health Grant. So starting out, this is the Mount Konocti interface fuel break. It's maintaining a fuel break that's already there. And, you know, you can kind of see once the parcels pull up, it's those locations are put in strategic places for pretty good reason, you know, clearing fuels around the subdivisions. One thing I'm particularly excited about with this proposal is that we were able to lump the Black Forest in with the private property because let me see if I can highlight the Black Forest here. So that's all federal land. So that means that that's the way you do that project is a lot different than the way you do projects on private land. But from the fire resilience perspective, it's all the same land. You know, the fire doesn't stop because the federal government owns the land. So we're able to send money into maintaining the whole interface and not just private or federally owned portions. Kind of zooming over to the western end of the county, this is the Scotts Valley fuel break. That's it's maintenance of some dozer lines that were put in during the Mendocino Complex fire. So the idea here is we'll be maintaining the dozer lines, and then the landowner is going to come back and maintain the areas between the lines with prescribed fire on their own. Then down here, this is Benmore Valley, where you can kind of see in the photo that the fire kind of burned around the top perimeter of the valley. And in those areas that burned, we're proposing to do some tree planting. And then in the part that didn't burn, we're going to be reinforcing the fuel breaks there, trying to preserve the trees that are still growing. Zooming up to Lucerne area, this is all work that is going to be managed by the National Forest. And it's actually a good illustration of the differences in the two grant programs. The yellow being that fire prevention grant, it focuses on defensible space, ingress, egress routes, kind of the areas where people are impacted by fires. So the National Forest is proposing to do hazard tree removal along the roads. And it's good. I was actually just up there on Saturday, and there's some sections. It's really dangerous with how many dead trees there are right on the road. But then the other parts, the Forest Health Grant, it's more landscape, broad brush, trying to get caught up on the fuel that's been building up in our forests for 100+ years. And zooming over, here is the fuel break outside of Clear Lake, and it's shown, this is about a 30-acre spot, but it's actually in combination with a few other projects. You can see once the parcels load, it's basically button up right up next to the city limits. And actually working with the landowner, the city of Clear Lake, and BLM on kind of a joint project here, where BLM is going to do some dozer maintenance on this line that has actually been cut in for several years during fire response times. And so with that dozer line, and then Clerk's going to do some fuel reduction here, and we're going to create a corridor that the landowner can come back later and use prescribed fire that's going to be fairly protected with dozer lines on either side. So I'm excited to be working with several partners in that area. So now we'll zoom down to the Cobb Mountain part of the county, and this is where we did the bulk of the Forest Health Grant work is proposed, because this is largely, I mentioned how we leverage this grassroots network of neighbors knowing neighbors, and everybody kind of knows everyone, and it kind of started up on Cobb Mountain, and that's reflected in the parcels that we included in the grant. So one of the things we consistently heard from people was there's an area, the top of the Kelsey Creek drainage, which, if you pull up the map of the county of everywhere that's burned, and Kelsey Creek drainage is that one spot that's not burned. So we wanted to make sure we did some fuel reduction up there. Here's the landowner. This parcel's not burned. It's off Bottle Rock Road. So that'll be good to play catch up on fuel reduction there. And then going down this way, we had an opportunity in several places. This corridor here is Harrington Flat Road. And we had some landowners that, like this owner owns both of these parcels. So since they were willing to work with us in the grant, we kind of created shaded fuel breaks all along Harrington Flat Road. And that's one of those roads that it's a prescriptive right-of-way, so the county doesn't actually own beyond the pavement. So the maintenance is just cutting the vegetation right at the pavement edge, which is really bad for evacuation during fire. So I'm glad we're going to be able to pull that back some. In these other areas, this is Siegler Mountain here. That's that communications site in the fire prevention grant, and then doing some other areas around closer to the parcels. This is the Mountain of Attention property, which was burned pretty bad in the fire, the Valley Fire. This is Avalon Springs, right at the part of Big Canyon Road where you drop down into the canyon. And then it goes down into the south part of the county. We have a few other property owners down there. And then there's nothing to the south of there because we are supporting the South Lake Fire Safe Council's chipping program. Anyway, so with that, I'll kind of bring it back to the slides. And again, I encourage anyone to pull that up and kind of look around and see what was really going on in their area. Current status, as of March, right now, the Forest Health Grant, we're $5 million is kind of a penciled in budget. It may go up, may go down, depending on what CAL FIRE is finally wanting to fund with us, which they'll know once they finally know how much funding they have. But we are expecting a grant agreement by July with that for that project. Then the fire prevention grant, the $3 million grant, we filed the CEQA notice last fall, and then it was posted in January and finally ended February 25th. So now that CEQA notice period has run out, we can hit the ground running with the boots on the ground work. So I've been frantically trying to execute subawards with some other partners to actually hire contractors and get the boots on the ground happening. So also part of the grant, we've been facilitating the Risk Reduction Authority Standing Committee. We've been using this as kind of the public arena for discussing how to implement this grant and how to do our planning. And through that, we worked with them to distribute the funding for lot clearing through 2 different community groups that are already engaged in that. And we do have, at least right now, about $95,000 left that's not been earmarked for a specific area of the county or an organization. So we're hopeful that we can use that as seed money to try to get a new landowner support program going somewhere in the county, maybe countywide. You know, there's a lot of options to, to work with. And then we're also doing the prioritization planning, which Laurel has been the lead person on that. And with that, I'll kick it over to Laurel.
Yeah, thanks, Will. So I'm working on a regional prioritization plan for Lake County, which is also sort of an implementation plan for an existing county plan called the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Will, if you could switch to the next slide. So the Community Wildfire Protection Plan was created in 2009, and it was intended to identify priority areas across the county for fuel reduction and other projects intended to reduce fuel risks. So that could be things like landowner assistance programs, chipping programs, fuel breaks around certain community areas, and all of that. The CWPP is currently in the process of being updated by the Lake County Resource Conservation District. And the update is drawing on help from community input, oversight from fire professionals and other environmental experts, including tribal environmental experts. And our hope is that this updated plan will help us seek grants for Lake County from the state of California because it lends legitimacy to grant proposals. So this is the map that you see here on this slide is sort of what the work that I do every day looks like. So I work on a GIS program to map these priority areas, both as they were in 2009 and also incorporating input from different community groups. So this is intended to be similar to the Regional Forest and Fire, collaborative, I sort of forget what the C stands for. Capacity program, there we go, which are regional plans, which usually include either different watersheds or different counties, but this is specific for Lake County. And this prioritization plan that I'm making will be based primarily on the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, so prioritizing areas that are already indicated in that plan and that will be added based on community input. Its intention is to develop a framework to streamline future community-wide projects. So this goes back to what Will was talking about when he said that Clerk used our existing grassroots network to put in projects for the Forest Health and Fire Protection grants. But in the future, we hope to be able to use these maps to do proactive outreach to the areas that are most impacted instead of using, being hindered sort of by the existing connections that we already have. And this will, again, hopefully put Lake County in a better position to receive funding in the future. And these are a couple of potential funding areas where we hope to be able to get some money using this project that I'm doing. You can switch to the next slide, Will. So in order to use this prioritization plan, we have to do 2 types of planning. The first one is what I'm doing right now, which is the top-down planning. And this is large-scale prioritization using a series of factors that can be applied and assessed in every region in the county. So this determines where we're going to do work and where we're going to focus our efforts. And then when we have those areas prioritized and identified, we go on to specific site plans, which tells us what we're doing and what the specific procedures are that we have to follow in every location. Next slide. So yeah, top-down planning. I'm using a couple data metrics to determine priority areas in the CWPP, including the CAL FIRE fire threat classification, which determines areas that are at risk of power line caused wildfires. So they use a couple of data metrics like vegetation type, slope, proximity to communities. I'm also using the CAL FIRE fire hazard severity classification. Data about the fire history and management history in the last 10 years, the area's status or proximity to evacuation routes, proximity to community growth boundaries, the wildland-urban interface, tribal areas, and towns. as well as field surveys and community input, and potentially with further workshopping other factors. So all of these go into determining the area's status from high to low priority. You can, yeah. And now this is an example of bottom-up planning. So this is a look at Avalon Springs and the really like granular level of detail that we go into once we determine a project area. So what we would do is maybe work with the landowner so they could develop a forest management plan. And this would help with CEQA and other permitting. And this would also give us a baseline of what the landowner is comfortable with and would like to be done on their land. We're working on developing a treatment area mapper, potentially, which landowners could use independent of us to map their property. We haven't rolled that out yet because we found that it is helpful for us to be out there to go and look at individual units. So in the future, we may or may not roll out this program. For now, we're just going ourselves. So we'll really be working on individual site plans for every project. And this is the second step or later steps after we've developed this prioritization. So this is an overview of our project process. So this is what we would do in each area. We would make a plan, and either this is a forest management plan or some other type of plan where we really cement what we're doing, where we're doing it. And this is meeting with landowners, meeting with government agencies if it's appropriate and if they own the land, and determining goals and preferences. And then going on to environmental review, CEQA, NEPA, cultural resources, just essentially making sure that the project is ready for funding. And then we'll look for grant funding and use grant funding to apply to these projects. And I think in some cases, it may be that we get grant funding first and then go into this phase. It really depends. And then finally, of course, there's the implementation stage, which is really boots on the ground. That's when people are doing work, getting stuff done that they need to get done, working with the landowners to hire contractors, and then finally monitoring, which is where clerk comes in, verifies that work is completed, that work is being done, and we report on the grant metrics. So this is the whole lifetime of a project. So where we're at right now with the prioritization plan, as of March 2021, the CWPP update is underway. I've been doing public outreach at different municipal advisory councils. I think my next meeting is going to be with West Region Town Hall. I believe it's on the 24th of this month. So if anyone listening wants to attend that, and that's their region, I'm also going to go back to the East Region Town Hall on April 7th. So look out for me there, and I'll also be presenting at the next Cobb Area Council meeting. And this is specifically where I'm explaining what areas are priority areas in the 2009 CWPP and asking for community input on new priority areas for this community wildfire protection plan update. So going to those meetings is really important because it's a way to get community input and participation in something that affects all of us, which is wildfire protection. And I've been doing this work with Clerk, obviously we're giving this presentation, and also the Risk Reduction Authority, a county group, and the Lake County Resource Conservation District, who is working on the Community Wildfire Protection Plan.
All right, thanks, Laurel. And now I'm going to get into kind of future projects and funding. Obviously, in the future, we want to utilize all the work and data gathering that Laurel's been doing in future community-wide grant proposals. And as I kind of alluded to before, that one of my big goals for this effort is to kind of make it public formally, in a sense of let's make sure we've gotten formal public input on $3 or $5 million proposal before it goes in, just to make sure we're not missing anybody. And I think a lot of the outreach that Laurel's been doing at the community level is going to help deal with that issue. But also, we want to continue to work with the Risk Reduction Authority to build more community partnerships. And that's, I mentioned we have that $95,000 that's still, unencumbered for lot clearing. And I'd really like to see that work with a new group to get new services out there to people. Because I think those helping landowners, while it may be, you're the homeowner, it's your responsibility. I think we can do a lot as a community to help people do what they need to do on their properties. Another thing, I want to enter into a master stewardship agreement with the U.S. Forest Service. The point of this is this would allow clerk to actually manage work on federal lands up there. And one of the things that we've managed to do is actually kind of max out the capacity of the local Forest Service staff. And one thing, this is kind of back to that issue of pace and scale. We want to try to do more. We're always trying to do more, but you got to be strategic about how you do that. And kind of our current situation is, everybody knows the forest was basically completely destroyed in 2018, and then last year another fire kind of finished the job. But the federal government has not made new appropriations for new staff people to implement new contracts there, which is unfortunate because they're great when there's a disaster. The feds throw money at the problem, but if there aren't people that actually understand the forest and work for the forest to manage those contracts, they can only do 200 or 300 acres a year with their staff. So because we were able to get the fire prevention grant, that's going to keep them busy for the next 3 or 4 years. So we're looking at entering into this agreement and then having growing clerk staff so that we can control the work that's being done up there. And because we can ask for more staff funding for clerk through these grants. We can't ask for more staff funding for the Forest Service. It doesn't work like that. So, so obviously we want to secure funding to support all this in the future, and kind of areas we're looking to support is, facilitation and collaboration, which is one thing we've realized through this whole process is if you have a grant opportunity that pops up and you don't already have your team together, you're already behind. And that was something we had to do. That's why it took so many months to get those proposals together, is trying to figure out who's doing what and where. So that's something I think it would be a good investment, money well spent, keeping that collaboration going on a monthly, regular basis. Also project tracking and monitoring, keeping track of where work's being done so that we know when it's going to come up again for maintenance, and then know not to work there if it was just recently done. That's obviously important too. And then planning and grant writing. As I mentioned, we had a little bit of funding from the Watershed Center to kind of get this going, but we'd like to keep it going, and we'll probably take more money than we got from them originally. We worked on a lot of volunteer motivation to get this off the ground, and happy to see where it went, but keeping it sustainable is probably going to take a little more funding. One of the other things we're doing is trying to develop new partnerships with people outside the county and develop new landowner assistance programs for kind of the larger scale properties. And to that end, we've started this another project. It's the North Bay Forest Improvement Program. And this was an opportunity we got pulled into by the Rebuild North Bay Foundation, which their service area is Sonoma, Lake, Napa, and Mendocino counties, kind of the 4 counties around here that have real bad fire problems. So they approached CAL FIRE and applied for this funding. It's $1.5 million, and it's to develop a new landowner assistance program similar to the federal EQIP program or CAL FIRE's CFIP. And you can see what those acronyms stand for. You don't need to dwell on those too much, but there's a lot of issues with both of those programs in terms of actually getting dollars into people's hands so that they can do work, because it's the cost share program. Similar to any other agricultural support program. But because of the way it works, the timing of when they pay bills and kind of the bureaucratic part of it, a lot of people don't engage. And I think I actually heard that CFIP there's not been a CFIP dollar spent in Lake County in like 10 years because of this. So part of CAL FIRE kind of understands this, and that's why they developed this. They wanted Rebuild North Bay with the 4 county partners to develop this new program. So it officially rolled out about a month ago, and we are technically taking applications, but it is still a few kinks to work out in our application process. So it'll be around for about 3 years unless we get more funding, and I think there's a good chance it could be funded more once we kind of get it off the ground. But this is just another example of how we're able to kind of leverage this work that we've been doing and building a network of people that need help, and working with partners outside the county to get a little more technical expertise to us in here in this project. So with that, that's all we had for right now. Does anyone have any questions or anything about Clerk's Fire and Forestry Program?
Thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll go back to Supervisor Pyska to start us off.
Well, I'm so grateful that you've spent the last few years and the whole clerk team building up this capacity. As Laurel mentioned, there's the potential for $1 billion next year from the state coming down for fire mitigation. And it is absolutely imperative that we have our structures in place so that we can take advantage of that funding. And so the work that you have been doing is critical to that, and we cannot thank you enough. Laurel, you have been hitting the road, you've been touring this county, you've been to every meeting there is, and you've been listening to the needs, and you've been mapping it out, and we have not had that happen ever. So thank you for doing that. And Laurel's an intern. I am hoping that after her internship is over, she's going to make a home here in Lake County because she's a rock star. So thank you to both of you. You covered a whole lot of information. I know this is just a primer of kind of the stuff that we've been talking about and working through in collaboration with the Risk Reduction Authority and some of the grassroots groups that you mentioned. The Collaborative Council was, really a lot of volunteers with that organization were instrumental in helping get this going. So lots of big gratitude to the volunteers all over who've been pushing this. I guess the most basic question is, how do people reach out to you if they have concerns in their areas? How do other supervisors reach out to you? And how do we get more programs in your system, going forward in the years to come?
Oh, there's a couple strategies for that. You could always contact us through the clerk website, or you can send me an email directly. Or I encourage people to participate in the Risk Reduction Authority. And I think that's something, that group was just created a couple of years ago to help address this problem. And it has so much potential. And I think it's, it can go as far as the people that get involved want to take it. So that'd be my recommendation. I will say, like I mentioned in the presentation, if you're a large forest landowner, say you own, 20 acres or 200 acres, and you want to try to get a community type project. And when I say community type project, that usually means large scale, crosses boundaries, involves several different landowners, maybe some public right-of-way components. I would prefer if you kind of like do that little bit of community building in your own neck of the woods before you bring that to us. And if you kind of want to figure out, some tips and pointers, we can kind of get you started. But that's kind of the scale we're working at.
Thank you very much. I was going to pass it on directly to Supervisor Simon, since I know you've been working with Clerk a little bit on the RRA, in case you wanted to add something from that perspective.
Obviously just appreciate the presentation, but the collaboration that's happening at the Risk Reduction Authority, the standing committee, everything, it's really starting to get traction. So what we're doing now, obviously, is the baseline work that's just going to help us really propel Lake County into a complete fire-safe county. And, all the collaborated efforts are just well appreciated. And I think we have the right folks at the table right now, but I know we're looking to grow and expand. We're looking to invite the cities. We're looking to engage more tribal governments here locally, and continue just to grow with our nonprofits and community organizations here. This is how you do it, from the ground up. So appreciate the steps being taken forward by everybody in this. And Laurel has attended our Middletown area town hall also, and hit every group, as Jessica said, across the county. So the communication and collaboration is happening. And we will start to see boots on the ground projects because of Clerk's efforts and everyone's else's, and it'll just continue to increase over the next few years. So it takes a while to get things going, but we're really starting to get that traction, and I'm excited about where we're headed. So thank you, everybody, and all the volunteers and the landowners stepping up to say, hey, we're all in this together here, and we got these projects we want to get completed. And we're even creating the Lake County Prescribed Burn Association. It'd be great to see those long cultural traditions come back to this area. Been done for thousands of years. We've taken a break, and now we're going to bring that stuff back to help with the forest management and also the safety of our communities that are built into these wildland urban interface areas. So I'm excited about how we're doing it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Supervisor. Laurel Bard, you had something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to really stress to any community members who are listening to this that really, if you want to get involved, the Risk Reduction Authority and also your municipal advisory council. Right now, we know it might be a little hard to figure out which municipal advisory council you fall under, or your area potentially doesn't have a municipal advisory council yet, but we're really gonna work on getting those community groups involved, and they're a really good outlet for you to have a place to express your concerns and to work with other community members who share those concerns. So getting involved in your municipal advisory council would be very helpful.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions from?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Laurel, I just wanted to remind you that the meeting for Worth is actually 17th instead of the 24th.
So I have a question. And bear with me. I know that I get hung up on certain things. I've been learning a whole lot in the past few weeks about programmatic EIR. Before a few weeks ago, I had no idea what programmatic EIR even was. But I do know from working with both Will and Laurel with BLM and CAL FIRE what's going to happen to the east of Clear Lake, which is actually their part of the project is a much smaller footprint than the CAL FIRE and BLM part of the project, where they're actually looking at 2,200 acres of potential prescribed burn, possibly next year. They're going to look at a little bit of remediation for this year with some vegetation abatement. But it required NEPA. And NEPA has taken them, granted, they're not only working on this project, but it's taken them 5 years since 2015 to start the process, to go through the archaeological, the biological, and to get everything approved in order to be able to do the prescribed burn, knowing what the impact will be to the environment and any abatements that need to be done or mitigation that need to be done to mitigate those impacts. It's the same basic concept for any other public land. I know on private land, you can bypass the CEQA or NEPA. I'm kind of looking at Will and Laurel. Is that possible or no, depending on who does it?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated, but you are kind of hitting one of the issues with doing these community projects. And for one thing, if I'm an individual landowner and I decide to go out and do fuel reduction in my yard, there's no permits required. You're encouraged to go out there and do it, have
Other
fun.
than air quality control.
Well, if you're not burning.
True.
But one thing, anytime the state funds a project, that is a trigger for CEQA. And in this case, they funded several $1 million. So we have to make sure we document how CEQA was handled for that. And also kind of complicating it is that projects on federal land need NEPA. At least for the projects we've proposed, the NEPA was already completed. So it's just a matter of kind of gathering it and submitting it to CAL FIRE. But it is kind of a giant paperwork exercise to document all these things that are exempt from environmental review. It's one thing in the future, we've kind of talked about this a little bit at the Risk Reduction Authority, is developing, and I don't know if it's a programmatic EIR or an annual exemption for certain projects, but there are certain things that we're going to want to maintain year after year. These are fuel breaks, fuel reduction within neighborhoods, and anytime, I think a lot of it, back to you can work in your neighborhoods and that doesn't necessarily require a CEQA review, but if you're getting state funding, it does. So it's like, if we figure out what things are going to trigger it and we can kind of structure the CEQA review that way. But in a lot of ways, it's, filing exemptions on a regular basis that coincide with funding that's awarded. That's not necessarily a bad strategy. It's just, you're still kind of, playing it case by case. So one thing, a programmatic EIR would allow everyone to kind of understand what they're in for, way ahead of time. But there's a process to get those done, and they're expensive. So, I haven't run the numbers and figuring out what's really the best, but I'm committed to looking into it more and trying to streamline it.
And the reason I bring it up is, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, in speaking with BLM and CAL FIRE, once this NEPA process has been approved and we can go ahead and move forward, that same binder of information and documentation can be reused for multiple years to ensure the safety of that area.
Yes.
Like you don't have to do NEPA again, all over again, just because you've gotten it approved, you did your burn. There might be a limitation on how long you can use it, but at least it provides you some room to be able to do this a little bit more automatically rather than having to go through a really rugged process like we've had to deal with so far.
Yeah, and I think of a good analogy I've used is thinking about maintaining your water and sewer systems. And I'd like to start thinking about vegetation management more of like infrastructure, because if you have to do these things to maintain a habitable structure in your neighborhood, maintaining your water and sewer, well, you also need to maintain the vegetation. And if your water line breaks, you don't have to do a CEQA review or to get before you dig the hole to fix it. You just do it because it's part of maintenance. So I think we need to start treating these projects more like that. But it may require some state action to really make that point. And it's kind of an evolving field. The CAL FIRE, and not to go off too much of a tangent, late last year they adopted a programmatic EIR called the Vegetation Treatment Program. And actually I have a webinar Thursday this week to hear about how NGOs and private parties have been using that CAL FIRE document to clear grants. So it's maybe it's a tool that we can use to streamline things in the future. Maybe we'll use it on the Forest Health Grant that's coming up this summer. But I need to learn more about it to see if it's actually going to streamline things, or because the flip side of a programmatic EIR is that it dictates you have to do X, Y, and Z. So in a lot of ways that provides certainty, but it can also add a whole lot of extra work if it's stuff that it doesn't need to be reviewed. And I think that's a big part. We need to figure out what level of review is acceptable in our community for these projects. And that's something I take pretty seriously, being someone who has worked in permitting in the county for a long time. You got to find that sweet spot where we're doing due diligence, but not burdening things with too much paperwork.
Right. No more added bureaucracy on top of it. And I believe what you're speaking of, the programmatic EIR that the state did, was for state land, and I don't know if they also did federal land, but that was back in March of 2020 or something like that. I saw the press release for that, and that's where I got the idea of at least discussing it today, just in case it wasn't a discussion at the RRA. To see how we can partner up where we do have something that we can just pull off the shelf and say, go ahead and do the project you want to do, versus think of a project, go through the process, and you eventually get to the project. If we can help facilitate to make that more efficient, then we actually are doing something great in helping keep us safe from the fires. So I just wanted to at least have that bring up the discussion in case that wasn't being discussed specifically over at the RRA.
Yeah, and I think from just a government operations standpoint, I did sit through the cannabis permitting discussion last week, and I think it's, clerk is going to be having to get exemptions and things through that department, and I know they're totally swamped with a lot of things right now, but a programmatic EIR and kind of leveraging CAL FIRE's environmental review may be a way to advance these projects without having to add more to the workload in CDD.
Yeah. So any other further comments or questions from the board before we open it up for the public? Seeing none, Jake, let's go ahead and open up the Zoom room and see if we have anyone from the public that wishes to make a comment or ask questions. Oh, and I see we have Jean Yoon. Let's go ahead and start with you.
Oh, great, thanks. I'm in a FireWise group right in that area of Harrington Flat that you outlined as one of your project areas, Will. And so first of all, I want to say how incredibly grateful we are down there that you have focused on the project, and we're very happy to see that things are moving forward. So I have 3 questions, and I'm just going to ask them all together because they're probably related. One, again, I'm in this FireWise group. I had moved into the area and asked the Cobb Area Council, and Jessica and Elliot were all great, and they referred me to that but I did notice that you didn't mention Firewise all throughout, and you did mention private folks getting involved. Do I need to pay attention to more things? Because I'll tell you that, just as a private citizen, it's hard to keep track of all the different organizations that were being suggested we need to keep in touch with. And I was kind of hoping that Firewise would be, for our community, a central point that folks in the group could rely on and not feel like, oh, they have to look at the Risk Reduction Authority programs or this or that. And so that's question one. Question two is, as we plan our activities for our group in that area, how do we make sure that we stay out of your way? If you're doing a major project there, we don't want to overlap days. So just pure logistics, how do we stay coordinated? And then question number three is, but then how do we participate? If that's even a possibility. I would say in the Firewise group, probably typical a lot of areas on Cobb, we have two types of people, let's say. We have the type who they do a lot of work, they have a lot of equipment, they're super helpful in educating the rest of us, like myself included, who don't know enough about these things. But when there's a big day of work down on Harrington Flat, I think a lot of the folks in my group are going to be asked, hey, can we participate? We have equipment, we have knowledge. There are CAL FIRE folks who live in the area. These people are paid to go and do work elsewhere. If there's a paid program in our area, can't we get the actual professionals who live in our area, the guys with knowledge, to work in our area, potentially for some of that money? Again, it's not so much about getting the money, it's about, if you're talking about the way to keep us safe is to hire a bunch of contractors to come in every 5 years or so on some cycle. To me, I don't know that that's the long-term sustainable certainty that most of us want to feel like we have. We want to feel like our community, our neighborhood knows how to manage the area that we live in. And so how do we participate with the boots on the ground? Because we have boots, Then there is, though, the other portion of our community, which honestly, for various physical or economic reasons, they can hardly participate in anything. But these are some of the most dangerous areas. These are people living on, half-acre, 1 acre plots all together, really deep in dense woods. And we all really think about that too. How do we help these folks who they don't have the resources? Nobody's focusing on them. Everything that we've heard about today is about very, very large areas of land, which I understand you have to do large first.
And Jim, let's go ahead and wrap it up, please.
And that's it. Those are the three questions together. Thanks, Bruno. Sorry about that.
We'll see. I think a couple of the answers involve the answers sort of work with the Risk Reduction Authority, and I say that that's my hope, that the Risk Reduction Authority will be kind of the catching ground for everybody that wants to figure out how to get involved with their community, and then we can steer them to whatever that local group is. And I did actually, I cut about 3 or 4 slides out of the process that we used to get the projects together, because a lot of it was, we did get I work with a few Firewise communities and get lists of projects and things, and it didn't all make it into the grants, but we had to kind of balance all those goals I mentioned of kind of spreading the money around, trying to get all the different groups involved, and trying to keep the project manageable. And that's one thing, just kind of as a side note, going into this, we heard a lot of kind of the word from CAL FIRE was a couple years ago was, Lake County's got a big problem. Whatever you ask for, you'll get whatever you ask for. That keeps ringing through my head. But the problem with that, I thought, we'll ask for a lot, but we need to not bite off more than we can chew. And that kind of boils down to not really knowing what we're capable of, and that's, clerk, and that's also the community and the partnerships. And one of my kind of frustrations with that is that not knowing your capabilities swings both ways. Is that you don't want to overbite, but you don't want to undershoot either. So my goal, another one of my goals over the next few years, is try to scale this up and try to do more and get more boots on the ground. And I think that kind of goes into one of Gene's other questions about, how can the locals get involved and coordinate with these contracts and the boots on the ground. And to that, I'll say that we don't have a firm strategy in place for how we're going to be distributing the forest health funds. And I know, based on the conversations I had with several of the landowners, a lot of them, they want to kind of receive the money through different ways. And some people said, you know, I just want to sign a right of entry and then have you find the contractor and deal with it. And then other people say like, well, I can do my own work. And there's a landowner that's actually prepared to finance like $200,000 worth of equipment on their own. And then they want to use some of this grant money to do work to help offset the cost. And I think that's a great idea. And he's actually working, he's contacted 3 or 4 other people that are also in the forest health grant in his neck of the woods. And he's going to try to get them to work out a deal where, you know, we pay the landowner to get the work done. The landowner pays somebody else to get it done. And if it happens to be their neighbor lives across the way that just bought a bunch of equipment, then that's even better because it pays to get that equipment there. And then it's there all the time, even once our grant's over. So that I think is a good strategy. I'm also trying to figure out how to kind of expand on that idea and create a what I call an equipment co-op. And that's kind of I don't know, it may take a few years to come to fruition, but just the idea that if you have people in an area that have skills, they just need access to good equipment that's maintained, try to fill that hole for them. But it's going to have to be strategic and make sure that people are trained, and the insurance is probably going to be you know, boondoggle, but we'll figure that out when we get to it. But
and I would suggest that I think the answer, the best answer was already provided as far as how to know what exactly is going on and how to be a part of it. I think is going to have to go through the municipal town halls, where those town halls should be aware of what's happening in the local area and being able to offer that information to everybody in the area of how they can get involved and what they can do. Because you're right that or Gene is right, that there is a lot of different groups and it's hard to keep track of everything. So hopefully things can get funneled through those town halls in some way, shape, or form. Jake, let's go ahead and move on to the next public comment, please.
All right, I've sent a unmute request out to the Zoom room floor. If you would like to make a comment, please unmute and state your first and last name.
Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and close public comment. Laurel, you had something you wanted to add?
Yes, I just wanted to add that Will and I are also working on developing a web map of projects that we can actually put out, like the map that's on the clerk website, but more comprehensive. So that could potentially be another site where private citizens could go and look at the work that's being done in Lake County that would not require necessarily going to a meeting. It would just be something you could do on your own if you have access to the internet.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions further from the board?
Last comment would be to Gene's question about, individuals, elders, folks that aren't able to work on that. I know that's a conversation we're having at Risk Reduction Authority. I know that the South Lake Fire Council has neighbor helping neighbor opportunities, and I know we want to build on those things. So it is conversations that are happening, but as we're building the program, hopefully those, we'll continue to expand on those as we move forward. So it is being talked about. How do we help our elderly and our disabled communities in this vegetation and things? So those conversations are happening, and they'll be developed as we move through the process.
Perfect. Thank you for that added information.
Yeah, and that is kind of the restructuring work that we're doing in the RRA, and then also in the Fire Safe Councils. We're looking at where that organization, agency, community intersections are, and how we can disseminate the information and have those arms of the programs reach the places that need to reach. And so that's a lot of the strategy work that Supervisor Simon and I are involved in right now.
Just one final comment too here, it's also creating a new industry, the potential for individuals. There are going to be folks that need lot clearing, other things like that. It also is, when we talk about it overall, is economic development opportunities for the county and business opportunities for folks. We already know there's not enough folks who go out and do the vegetation clearing and other things. So in the long run, we're also creating a new economy to make our places, our communities safer, but also creating job opportunities down the road. So it's also economic development and safety of our community being combined together when you look at the long-term future of this.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much for your presentation today and for all the work that you're doing. And I'm sure that we will be hearing more of the debriefing of all your projects once you've gotten some completed, so we can figure out what the impacts have been and how we can move forward and do more.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Supervisor Peisker, for bringing that to us. So we have 12:45. We are behind schedule. We have 2 more timed items. I know we have 45 minutes set aside for the quagga mussel prevention program. Is that going to be a 45-minute presentation? I'm looking at Director De Leon.
I think Angela's presentation is about 30 minutes, and she has an excellent overview of what we've been doing and what we are doing and what the plans for the future are. So I would encourage that we watch that, and then she has some space there at the end for questions and answers.
Okay, and the reason I was asking was not to truncate any type of presentation. It's more to check in for lunch.
Yep.
Is the board okay with proceeding with 6.6?
Whatever is best for staff.
Yeah, I'd really like to be able to check with staff. And then I did see Greg Justy turned his camera on too, so I don't know if there's timing issues or something to consider.
Checking in with CAO Hutchinson. Are we good to go with staff?
I need to take it offline for a moment to check on that. If so, do you want to take a short break?
Yes, let's just go ahead and take a 3-minute break, come back at 12:48. That way we don't push it too far away, and let's see what we do.
Well, you know, Mr. Chair, I know she's looking at that, but, you know, I would be inclined to, you know, take a lunch break till 1:30 and then come back. So I just put that out there.
Okay. And I do know that.
I agree with that. I think we should just take a lunch break.
Okay. The rest of the board?
Yeah.
Okay. Apologize for everyone that has been waiting for our 11:15 and 12 p.m. items. We will go ahead and break for lunch and come back at 1:30 and hope to see you all back then. Thank you.